Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Babs, whose full name was Barbara Roxburgh, was absolutely spent. All the energy passing through her veins had drained out of her, rather like the last remaining water in the bathtub when it finally leaves the tub and is remembered no more. She knew she couldn't keep running like this before she finally dropped like a fledgling that falls from its nest, where its fate almost seems inevitable. If she stopped, if she dared stop, if she gave up, she knew there would be no hope left. There wouldn't be any chance to get away from this crazy, deranged man, for he would find her. She knew he would. He was behind her, not far behind her at all. She had heard his drunken, somewhat gargled grunting, along with his heavy pounding boots, beating down the twigs and leaves furiously on the forest floor. His voice had boomed loudly, in a drunken crescendo of words that had warned her that he'd get her. "You stupid woman! I'm gonna get you! I'm gonna get you! And when I do, you'll be sorry!" he had ranted. Bullets from this man's hunting rifle unabashedly flew past her, hitting some of the tree trunks and scourging their bark, rather like the darts on a dartboard, seemingly missing her by mere inches. So she knew that this was no game. This man was crazy. Was he always this unhinged, she wondered, or had the alcohol provoked him to anger? She knew well that when some people drank too much alcohol, it could throw their inhibitions away and inspire them to do crazy, outlandish things. She'd seen her own father lose it with her mother once, when he'd overindulged in alcohol, after enjoying too many beers with friends. When he'd returned home that evening, he'd charged after her mother like an angry, incensed rhino, all guns blazing, not even appearing to know what he was angry about. Babs had never known her father to express so much outrage, for he and her mother had never fought during the course of their entire marriage. It was during this drunken rant that he began swearing at his wife and throwing his fists around furiously, but later on he'd crumpled on the floor into a heap and fallen into a deep sleep. The following morning, when hearing how outraged he had become after drinking so much alcohol, and how he'd run after his wife like a raging zombie, her father had been so horrified, totally mortified by his behaviour, that he'd refused to drink ever again, knowing that alcohol brought the very worst out of him. Was this man wired much the same way as her father, Babs wondered? I mean, he really did seem to have a low tolerance to alcohol, because it had brought out a rage in him. He had been so charming at first, so amenable, until he had overindulged in all those beers. Then it was like he had become possessed by a demon. She knew his name was Max McKeith. She had gathered that from their interaction together, but unlike her father, he didn't appear to be physically impeded by the surge of alcohol in his system. Indeed, it had seemed to have fired him up all the more, for his legs appeared not to give way beneath him. He was dangerous and volatile. Babs had known that instinctively, for the murderous look he'd given her through those soulless dark eyes of his. Eyes that at first had been mesmerizing, a beautiful green colour that had made her heart flutter. But sadly those green eyes of his had suddenly grown dark, cold and menacing, like that of an ominous thundercloud, and had sounded every single warning bell in her body. She'd pushed him away, of course she had, refusing his amorous advances. It was that terrifying, "I want to kill you" look that had told her instincts to run like she'd never ever run before. She had been propelled by an invisible, urgent, tugging force within her that had driven her through the heart of the woods like a stone in a slingshot. Every cell in her entire body was on high alert, urging her to keep fighting, not to dare to give up, for her physical need to survive was indomitable. If this man caught up with her, she knew it would all be over. Men like Max McKeith. She'd seen the types often enough on the crime documentaries she loved to watch. Well, he wouldn't be happy until the life force within her was fully extinguished. She knew this man had hunted before, but most likely it would have been deer or some kind of wild hog. But now he had upgraded his killing to the human kind, and she could sense he was getting a thrill out of it. He was thoroughly enjoying the chase. She knew he could have already killed her, but he'd waited. He was waiting, biding his time, because shooting at her from a distance was far too easy for him. Where was the fun for him in that? He wanted to blow her brains out as he watched her begging for her life, so he could have the full satisfaction of seeing her terror as he finally pulled the trigger and ended it all for her. It would seem her rejection of him had set this man off into an incandescent, fiery rage, the likes of such she'd never seen before. She closed her eyes tightly for a brief moment, and like a hunted animal, she became almost resigned to her impending fate. But an urgent, persistent voice within her kept telling her that she needed to run. If you don't keep running, he's going to kill you. He's going to kill you. But where was she running to, in this huge labyrinth of lofty evergreen trees that shot up into the sky like giant green pencils? It was the dead of night. There was no one around on the sequestered camping ground. It was just him and her. No one would hear her frantic cries for help. But even if she were to scream, she could not, for her parched throat was dry and scratchy, her voice paralyzed severely by the injection of fear that had sent her blood shooting straight to her legs, so that all she knew to do was to just keep on running. If she ran like this when she was at school, when she was in senior high, the sports teacher, Mr. Munro, would have thought she was headed for great things, for she would have lightly beaten all the rising sports stars at the time, if she could run like this. The miserably insufficient light of her slimline torch was grossly inadequate, and was beginning to fade. She was desperately relying on it to help her navigate her way cautiously through the ambiguous obscurity that clung to her from every side, in this dense, tenebrific grove of trees that rather reminded her of a large, shadowy battalion of soldiers. The wood grove was inauspiciously silent, as if even the crickets and frogs had become subdued, and sensed something was up that had rudely disturbed the ripple of their evening's chorus. The only sound to be heard were the heavy boots of the man thundering behind her. The light of his torch burst through the trees, invading the darkness like a blinding spotlight, so that the dark shadows faded away. The man refused to give up. His pursuit of her was relentless and inexhaustible, and Babs had never seen a man so drunk, capable of moving with such a nimble dexterity. He certainly knew how to hold his alcohol. As she ran, her legs had been scratched to pieces by thorny briars that had reached out to grab her like angry gnarled hands, and she had been thrown to the ground when she failed to see the burgeoning roots beneath her feet that, like thick veiny tentacles, had grabbed her unawares like a hunter's trap and flung her to the forest floor, very nearly succeeding in twisting her ankle. She had refused to give up. She had risen to her feet, her breath raspy, her heart pounding wildly in the chaos of this frenzied, very desperate moment when her life seemed to flash before her, a sombre reminder of what she had to lose if she didn't overcome the insurmountable odds that were now stacked against her, which seemed so overwhelming. Why wouldn't this drunken man pass out on the forest floor? Instead, he appeared to be firing on all cylinders, with a dogged determination that was resolute and refused to abate, his drunken slur ever reminding her that he was not far behind her. "I'm coming for you," he cried out. "I'm coming for you." She was only 22 years old, with her whole life still ahead of her, for goodness sake. There was so much she wanted to do. She was studying to be a doctor, a paediatrician to be exact. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be happening. Not to her. She'd been flung straight into a dreadful nightmare. The impenetrable blackness of the woods was no friend to her, as everything was shrouded by an obscurity that was so dense. There were brief moments during her desperate scramble through the trees that she occasionally welcomed a peppering of moonlight, as its pearly intrusion through the canopy above her head gave her a short moment of reprieve when she could see where she was going a little bit better. She began to wilt like a wild flower in an alpine meadow that has been severely scorched by a searing heat wave, so it surrenders to the evening, as it soon becomes one with the earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, which is a smooth rhythmic flow of life, here today, gone tomorrow. Her heart continued to flutter wildly in her chest, but not in a good way. It boomed loudly in her ears, and the sweat saturated her clothes, making them hang on her like wet sheets. It was cool in the woodgrove. It was early spring, and the night still had not fully let go of the winter chills. But Babs felt no cold, only in the insufferable heat of this never-ending chase. 10 hours earlier, Babs had innocently come to this camping ground with her best friend Veronica. She had no way of knowing that this would be the last day of her life on earth, the last day when her heart would beat in her chest, the last day when she would breathe in the delicious mountain air, the last day when her eyes would gaze out at an exquisite view spread out before her like a perfect postcard. All these things you take for granted when you assume the following morning you will wake up to face another day. But what? What if there was no more tomorrow? What if her life was drawing to its final full stop? If Babs had known that she was living on borrowed time, where the sands and the hourglass have almost run their course, she may never have taken this trip to the mountains in the first place. It wasn't like she'd really wanted to come here anyway. Her best friend Veronica Wilton could be very persuasive when she wanted to be, and Babs had folded under the ebullient pressure of her friend's enthusiasm, and had been encouraged to come on this trip, after Veronica had broken through her wavering reluctance. It had been a spur-of-the-moment trip, one of those things you decide to do at the very last minute. Veronica had insisted that a weekend camping trip like this would wipe away the chains of disillusionment that had imprisoned her hope and shackled her ability to see the way ahead of her clearly, as the future itself stood behind a dark, burgeoning cloud that had stolen away the beautiful light that the future had so happily promised. Veronica had painted a dewy picture in Babs's mind about how magnificently appealing this camping ground was, with its dramatic, very arresting views over Mount Rainier, and how this would be the quintessential opportunity for the two of them to get away for a long, extended weekend that could possibly stretch out to 4 or 5 days if need be. Veronica had told Babs that they could set out their tents close to the silvery lake, surrounded by mesmerizing tall, lofty evergreen trees. They could enjoy talking together over a crackling fire at night, under a canopy of silvery stars, while they roasted marshmallows together. I mean, what could be more romantic than that? Then during the day they could go fishing together, or take one of the rowing boats from the boathouse across the lake, or they could go hiking up one of those intrepid mountain trails through the trees. Veronica had come to the Lakefield camping ground on many occasions before with her family, and believed it was the best place for Babs to be able to gain some perspective over her life again, and to realize that even if things in the past had let you down really badly, and thrust upon you great disillusionment, that there is a bright future around the next corner, and a better one at that. Veronica vehemently believed that God had a divine plan for everyone, and if something didn't work out, then as far as Veronica was concerned, it was never meant to be. She passionately believed in the smooth flow of serendipity in the lives of all people. It was a God-given gift to be supernaturally in the right place at the right time. That was something that she believed was always preordained. "Let's go to the mountains, Babs," she said. "I know the perfect camping spot that we can go to. It's around this really, really beautiful lake, surrounded by tall, lofty trees. It's called Lakefield Camping Ground. Not many people know about the place. It's owned by my uncle, Chris Wilton, and he doesn't advertise the camping ground. People learn about it through word-of-mouth advertising, which is the best form of advertising there is, because he does a roaring trade, you know. Although I hasten to say at this time of year, being early spring, of course, well, it's going to be reasonably quiet there. It's the perfect time for us to go. We could potentially have the whole place to ourselves. I've been going there with my family for many years. Imagine what fun we could have camping around the lake. Just the two of us, Babs. Go on. It'll be a wild, intrepid adventure for us. And no one likes an adventure more than you do. My dad will lend us all the camping gear we need, and I'll pop off to Walmart and buy some nice food to bring along with us. Salads and meats to last us a few days. That's if we extend our stay, of course. There's a refrigerator and freezer unit on the property, in a brick building there, where we can store our stuff. It's also got toilets and showers and fresh drinking water. My uncle says that I can go there whenever we like, without ever being charged. It's a win-win situation, and it'll do you the world of good, Babs. You've been so despondent of late. I want to see you getting out of this lugubrious melancholia that you've been wallowing in, like a hippo in a body of water in Africa. It's getting me down, it really is, seeing you so subdued and down in the dumps like this. The Babs I know is normally the life and soul of the party, the person that makes everybody laugh. I've never seen you look so flat in all my life, as if all the bubbliness inside you has just dissipated. I can't believe you're letting that loser upset you like this. Don't let him destroy your life, Babs. If he was eager to let you go so easily, more fool him, that's what I say. He's going to regret losing you, believe me, he is. But sometimes a person doesn't appreciate what they really have until they lose it, if you know what I mean. I think without you in his life, Russell's going to realise how miserable his lot is. I know you're saying that to make me feel better, Veronica. Nice try, but I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I wouldn't say something I didn't mean, Babs. You know what I'm saying is true. Anyway, enough about Russell. How about this trip to the camping ground I was telling you about, for an extended weekend? Go on. Please say yes. I'll organise everything myself. I promise you don't have to lift a single finger. I want you to relax. I will do everything. The shopping, the organising. You don't have to do a thing. Sorry, Veronica, but I don't know if I'm up to going to Mount Rainier, Babs had said. But it's very kind of you to offer, very generous. It's a nice thought. The truth is I don't feel like doing anything. I'd rather sit here stuffing myself with doughnuts and getting enormously fat, so no one will ever want me or desire me again, and I won't get hurt, and have someone blow up my dreams into hundreds of pieces of flying shrapnel. Don't say that, Babs. If you hang around this dingy, oppressive apartment, stuffing your face with doughnuts, you're going to get more miserable. That's the whole idea, Veronica, don't you get it? I want to be miserable. I want to wallow in my misery. No, you don't. Of course you don't want to be miserable. Don't talk such nonsense. You need fresh air and exercise. You'll feel so much better if we get away. Go on, let's do it. You won't regret it. I can promise you that. I don't understand how any of this has happened, Veronica. I thought Russell loved me. I really, really did. I thought we'd be together forever. We had big dreams. We talked about them tirelessly, where we would live after we got married, how many children we would ultimately have. And then he just dumps me out of the blue like this. How could he do this to me, Veronica? Said Babs, her eyes shining with tears that she was desperately trying to hold back, but not very successfully, for one slid unabashedly down her cheeks, which she hurriedly wiped away, for she didn't want Veronica to see her crying, but it was too late for that. Veronica had never seen her friend look so disillusioned and disenchanted by her lot in life. Babs had big revealing black crescent moons under her puffy eyes. Her face was pinched and drawn, as if she hadn't eaten for several days. Babs looked like someone who'd lost a loved one in a tragic car accident and was consumed by an all-encompassing grief. Veronica reasoned to herself that for Babs the end of her relationship with Russell really was like experiencing a grievous, tragic loss in her life that she'd never seen coming. Veronica had been equally surprised that Russell had ended their relationship like this, for she had mistakenly assumed that they were set up for life. Veronica and Babs shared an apartment together in Seattle. It was, of course, a tiny apartment, because rental costs were fiercely expensive, but nevertheless they loved the place, for it had become a home to them. When Veronica had opened the front door of the apartment after returning home one evening, she had discovered to her shock and horror that her best friend Babs was lying in a crumpled heap on the floor, drowning in a sea of tears. Veronica had been very concerned to find Babs in such a sorry state, and had wondered privately if her friend had been attacked by someone, until she managed to hear the words escaping from Babs's own mouth. "Veronica, he's dumped me! Russell has dumped me! Can you believe that?" She had said, her eyes red with dismay. Veronica had been thrown between a mixture of relief that her best friend had not been subject to a brutal attack, and extreme sadness to learn Babs's very sad news that her loving 5-year relationship with Russell had come to an abrupt end. They had been so good for each other. In her humble opinion, they were the very last couple that she'd have ever envisaged calling it quits on their relationship. Babs and Russell had been the couple everyone assumed would be together forever, for they seemed to belong together. Put it this way, if Veronica had been a betting woman, she'd have put big bucks on the fact that Babs and Russell would be together forever. For there had been times she had secretly envied their relationship, for she believed that Russell was the perfect man for Babs. Now she was beginning to doubt that he'd ever been perfect in the first place, for she was privately disgusted with how Russell had treated Babs. Mind you, was there ever an easy way to end a breakup? And the one that ended the relationship was the one most often severely judged. Russell was a good person, so what on earth had induced him to break up with someone as lovely as Babs? Veronica had rushed over to Babs and picked her up off the floor. Babs's slender body had been like a rag doll. She had tucked Babs into bed and given her some sleeping tablets. The moment Babs's head had hit the pillow, she had fallen into a deep sleep. Veronica was still not sure why things had ended so badly for the couple that she believed would have been together forever. She reasoned now might be a good time as any to ask Babs what had really happened that evening, when she'd returned home to find her best friend in such a dreadful state. Surely there was more to this enigmatic story than met the eye. She needed to ask Bab why Russell had pulled the plug on their relationship so mercilessly. Maybe it would be extremely healthy for Babs to talk about what had happened between her and Russell that evening when he'd ended their 5-year relationship so resolutely. Babs had completely shut down over the breakup. She was traumatized and devastated by it. She didn't want to talk to anybody, and had withdrawn into her shell, not wanting to take any part in daily life, which was why Babs had not even bothered to change out of the pyjamas she had been moping in for several days now. She had refused to attend any lectures at the university, which could end up costing her dearly. Veronica knew things could not go on like this indefinitely, or her friend would begin to fade away before her very eyes, especially given she hadn't eaten anything for days now. They always say talking helps, don't they? That's why so many people all over the world visit therapists when they've experienced some kind of emotional trauma in their lives, for it seems to help such people to talk about their emotions, to purge out some of their grievous sorrow that holds them to ransom in their lives. literally disabling them from being able to move forward. A therapist's job is to listen to their patient and help them clear their own way through the fog of doubt and self-recrimination, so that they themselves can find a clearer, more brighter path to navigate. Veronica knew she was no therapist, but like Babs, she was studying to become a paediatrician, and they were in exactly the same year at university. She could only try her best to listen to her friend, and pretend that she was not emotionally involved with her. She would try to hear her out with a detached interest. Veronica wanted to be a successful paediatrician one day, and talking to patients about their problems went with the territory of being a good doctor, so she might as well listen to Babs. Who knows, she might be able to offer her best friend some sound advice. I hate to say this to you, Babs, but I'm going to be honest with you. It really doesn't suit you to sit here feeling all sorry for yourself, she said rather gingerly. I mean, I want my cheerful, happy-go-lucky best friend back, don't I? Where on earth did she go? This apartment of ours has become like a mausoleum with you in this sorry state. I almost dread returning home every evening from university, because I don't know how I'm going to find you. You haven't changed your pyjamas for days. I don't know when you last washed, when you brushed your teeth, or your hair for that matter. It's all over your face and it's all greasy and horrible. I don't even know when you last ate. And all you do is stay in your bed all the time. Everybody at campus has been asking after you. I've been lying through my teeth about you to protect you, telling people that you're as sick as a dog with some kind of nasty virus that is making you throw up all the time. Everybody sends you their best wishes for a swift recovery. But I'm not going to keep covering for you. You feel so sorry for yourself, don't you? And it's not healthy. You've barely been able to get out of your bed for days on end. You've lost a ton of weight. I'm worried about you. All this talk about stuffing yourself with donuts. I don't know when you last ate a thing. Feeling sorry for yourself is not helping you, Babs. Not at all. You look absolutely dreadful. Why can't I feel sorry for myself, Veronica? I might remind you this is my life, and I make my own choices, don't I? I loved him, and then he dumps me out of the blue like that. How can he do that to me, Veronica? We'd been going strong for 5 long years. We had our futures mapped out for us. I thought after university we'd get married, and then he just suddenly says to me he needs to talk to me, and then he says I think we should end things, just like that. He gives me no explanation whatsoever. I don't even have a clue why he dumped me, Veronica. Oh, my goodness. You don't think there might be somebody else, do you? She asked, her face suddenly growing white with horror, as if the very idea had not even occurred to her until now, for she could never have imagined Russell with anyone else. He certainly wasn't the cheating kind, and he only ever appeared to have eyes for her. She threw her hands over her head in exasperation and said to Veronica with wide, earnest eyes, "Oh, my God! Maybe it is someone else. Maybe Russell has met someone else. Oh, my goodness, Veronica! He's in love with someone else. I wonder who the hell she is. Maybe she's prettier than I am." "Don't jump to conclusions, Babs. It may well not be another woman. And if you want to know the truth, I seriously doubt it is. With other men, maybe. But definitely not Russell. What exactly did he say to you when he broke up with you? Try and think about it. Maybe we can make some kind of sense of what really happened between you. Men don't just break up with no good reason at all. Something else had to be going on." "I told you. He said we needed to talk, and when he said that, his face was so solemn. I knew whatever he had to share with me, it was really, really bad. You get a feeling about these things, don't you? I asked him to tell me what was going on. I thought some friend of his had died or something, because he seemed so desperately sad, so reflective. And then he said to me, 'I think we should end things.' I asked him what he meant by that. He said, 'We're not working out, are we? I think we should call it quits on our relationship.' That was news to me, because unless I'm extremely delusional, I thought we were happy together. I certainly wasn't feeling as if things weren't working out between us. You'd think I'd noticed something like that, wouldn't you? Far from it, in fact. I would say over the years we've grown closer and closer. So none of this makes any sense at all. So what did you say to that? Asked Veronica. Surely you demanded from Russell some kind of explanation as to why he was doing this and ending things with you. I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense. Of course I asked him what he was on about. I told him we loved each other, and he said that he didn't love me. Not anymore, anyway. That the feeling wasn't mutual. So I burst into tears and made an absolute fool of myself. I then told him to take me back home. I couldn't bear to look at him anymore. He'd hurt me so much, and I was in such a state of shock. I felt as if someone had stabbed me with a pickaxe. He took me back to the apartment, saying he was very sorry for hurting me so much. He wanted to call you so that you would be there for me to help me through my grief. I told him not to bother, that I'd be absolutely fine and I'd soon be over him. It was humiliating being dumped like this. Completely soul-destroying, let me tell you. It must have been soul-destroying. Devastating, said Veronica sympathetically. I mean, you loved him, and you still love him with all your heart, because that feeling doesn't go away, does it? You thought he felt the same way as you, and then he throws a curveball at your life like this. None of this is fair. Well, he did try to comfort me, said Babs. He put his arms around me. He walked me to the front door and tried to follow me into the apartment. He said he'd put the kettle on and make me a sweet cup of tea to make me feel better. I pushed him out of the front door and locked him out. I didn't want him to touch me. Not after he told me he didn't love me. I didn't want him feeling sorry for me. To be fair, he was upset that he'd hurt me so much. But at the same time, I think he was extremely relieved to end things with me. I really got that impression. It was almost as if a big burden had been lifted off his life, and that he was glad to abandon me, like a huge backpack that you drop to the ground after a long journey. It sucks that he hurt me like this, Veronica. It really sucks. I don't know if I'll ever be able to love or trust another man again. When the man I loved spits me out like an old piece of tobacco. He really betrayed my trust, Veronica. I had no idea that our relationship would fall apart at the seams like this. I thought we were together for keeps. More fool me. Well, he's the fool, isn't he? But this is not about you, Babs. You do know that, don't you? Hand on heart, I absolutely believe that, from what you're telling me, that none of this is about you. Something is going on with Russell. I know it is. What do you mean it's not about me? Of course it's about me. It's deeply personal. He dumped me, didn't he, Veronica? Sometimes when people have issues that they can't handle, they push the people they love away, don't they? Maybe that's what's going on here. How has Russell been towards you these past few weeks? Has he been a little more aloof, perhaps? Have you noticed any changes in his behaviour? Babs considered Veronica's words, and then she nodded. Yes, over the last 6 weeks or so, he's been acting extremely different towards me. But he's been studying so hard, so I just thought he was tired. But come to think of it, he's been very withdrawn and subdued, as if something has been bothering him greatly. Every time I asked him what was wrong, he'd say that there was nothing going on, but he was just doing a lot of studying, and his mind was all over the place. Well, that's what he told me, but it's true. He absolutely has not been himself for quite a while. So there you go, then. Something's going on with him, isn't it? You know what he's like. You've always been the gregarious, outgoing one in your relationship. He's the deep thinker out of the two of you. He doesn't talk very much. He's reticently reserved, isn't he? I wouldn't fret about it if I were you. Give him some time. Maybe he's got personal issues he needs to address. And when he finally comes to his senses, he'll be begging you to take him back. I know Russell deeply loves you. I've seen the way he looks at you. I seriously doubt there is anybody else on the scene. Put it this way, as long as I've known him, he's only ever had eyes for you. I think he's got stuff he needs to sort out, I really do. People break up all the time, don't they? And then they get back together. It's called taking a break from a relationship. It happened to Princess Catherine and Prince William, didn't it? They went their separate ways for quite a while, I believe. People assumed on the world stage that their relationship was over, but they got back together again and married, did they not? Things aren't written in stone, you know. The tide can so easily change. You mark my words, you and Russell will be back together sooner than you know. And I don't believe for a second he doesn't love you. He's saying that to push you away, because he wants to find himself. Perhaps he's going through some emotional upheaval at the moment. People are extremely complicated. It's the quiet ones you sometimes have to second guess. And Russell, well, he's not exactly forthcoming, is he, at the very best of times? You really think that that is what this is? Asked Babs, her sad face suddenly lighting up like a Christmas tree, as hope began to flicker across her face. What Veronica was saying made perfect sense. Something was going on with Russell. Perhaps he was experiencing the dark night of the soul. He needed to sort out some of the stuff in his life. But when the murky, cloudy water in his life cleared, he'd realized they were meant to be together. Russell wouldn't just throw their relationship to the wayside like this. They would have a future together after all. Veronica was right. Babs knew instinctively that Russell loved her. The fact he said he didn't anymore was his way of pushing her out of his life. He was going through some emotional turmoil of some kind. It would be so typical of him to not include her in any of this. Babs remembered how when his great-uncle had passed away a couple of years prior, he'd slipped into a deep melancholia and pushed her away, telling her not to come around any more. Maybe he needed his space again, and she'd give him just that. In fact, she'd give him all the space he needed. Veronica was delighted to see a glimmer of her fun-loving friend coming back to her, almost as if Babs had been away on a long sabbatical and suddenly returned to their apartment. "I think the two of you will be back together in no time at all," she said encouragingly. "But rather than sitting around here waiting for things to happen, you need to get out there, Babs. Haven't you heard the saying, 'A watched kettle never boils'? How about coming on this camping trip? Go on, you know you want to. You'll love the lake, you really will. I'll organise everything, and I'll drive us there myself. As I keep saying, you don't need to lift a single finger. I'll even pack your clothes if you like." "Well, when you put it like that, how can I refuse? You know you're right. I don't fancy being cooped up in this apartment all weekend. If I go out on the town, I'm bound to bump into people I know, and I don't fancy that right now. So getting away might just be what I need to do." Veronica was surprised and delighted at how quickly Babs had bounced back to her old happy-go-lucky self. She realized her words had stirred some hope into Babs' heart, that this might not have been the end for her and Russell. And now she seemed delighted to be going on this camping trip. And when they arrived at their due destination, let's just say no one was happier to be at this gloriously prepossessing camping ground than Babs herself. "Your uncle owns this Lakefield camping ground, does he? I mean, isn't he your father's brother, because he has the same surname as you?" "That's right. You wouldn't know they were brothers. Chris Wilton, well, he's a big strapping man, built for the great outdoors, you could say. When he married his wife, they bought the camping ground together. Never looked back, you know, as it became the gift that keeps on giving. My father, on the other hand, is so different to his brother. He plays golf, loves reading, plays bridge, so they couldn't be more different. But I'll give Chris a call, and then he'll give us the code we need for the gate, in order for us to easily access the Lakefield campground, so that we'll be good to go. To tell you the truth, Babs, I think Uncle Chris will probably be delighted that we're using his facilities, so soon after the winter, that is." It would seem the 2.5-hour journey from Seattle to Mount Rainier had been absolutely beautiful, with the cheerful spring sunlight beaming through the windscreen window, while 80s music, which was Bab's absolute favourite, was being played energetically on the car stereo, so that both girls were bobbing happily in time to the music, and singing along with the likes of Madonna, Olivia Newton-John, and Boy George. Babs felt as if a heavy cloud had been lifted off her little shoulders, as she talked away happily to Veronica the whole trip, about everything and nothing, taking great care not to talk about her breakup with Russell. Babs decided that she'd give Russell time to realise what he was missing without her cheerful presence in his life. And on this camping trip, she didn't want to be focusing on him. Otherwise, she'd never get to enjoy herself. And she intended to make the very most of this extended weekend break. Veronica had been absolutely right. This break was exactly what Babs needed, and she was extremely delighted that she had agreed to come on it. "I'm so glad I came, Veronica. Thanks for doing this for me. It means an awful lot, you know. You really are a generous friend." "Well, I had to do something, didn't I?" said Veronica. "I couldn't continue seeing you look so miserable, Babs. My Uncle Chris was very pleased that we're using his facilities, you know. He told me we're welcome to use the camping ground whenever we like. The good news is it's practically empty, because it usually is after winter, although I believe there is a couple that will be camping there this weekend, so we won't be totally alone. But the weather's been so perfect of late, hasn't it? It could almost be summer. But I dare say in early spring, some people are extremely reluctant to book the campground, because they're very worried about it getting too cold at night. I don't worry about that kind of thing. Uncle Chris keeps plenty of extra blankets on the site, so if people get cold, they know what to do." "It's a pity there's another couple staying at the campground," said Babs. "But I guess you can't have everything. I just hope, for our sakes, they keep themselves to themselves and don't bother us." The journey to the Lakefield campground in Mount Rainier had been efficiently quick. Veronica's bright red Jeep arrived at a very large black wrought iron gate, where she quickly keyed in the secret code that her Uncle Chris had given her. The large gate whooshed wide open, and the bright red Jeep rattled precariously down a thin, windy dirt road, fringed by tall, lofty evergreen trees. The road was scattered liberally with stones of all shapes and sizes, the smaller ones pinging against the car bonnet, and there were several dips in the road that caused the Jeep to bounce over the uneven terrain. "We are here, Babs," said Veronica triumphantly. "Welcome to the Lakefield campground. You'll understand shortly why it's called Lakefield campground. We'll follow this road for quite a while, past a wild alpine field full of flowers, until we get to the lake, which you will see is surrounded by tall, lofty groves of trees, and in the immediate background you'll observe the imposing silhouette of Mount Rainier herself, covered in snow and ice. It's the largest volcano outside of Alaska, you know." "Is it?" asked Babs in surprise. "I didn't even know it was a volcano." "Well, I guess you learn something every day, don't you?" said Veronica. "It's hard to believe Mount Rainier is so close to home. I mean, it didn't take us long to get here, did it?" "No, it didn't. You're right about that. It's almost at our front doorstep," Babs agreed. "Well, I believe it's over 1,400,000 feet," said Veronica reflectively. "People have died climbing Mount Rainier, you know. It's still an active volcano. You're going to love it here, let me tell you, Babs. I should have brought you here a long time ago. I guess you could say it's our family's best-kept secret. I remember getting lost here when I was only 3 years old. My parents thought I'd drowned at the lake, but they found me in the woods standing next to a large berry bush and stuffing myself with berries. My hands, my cheeks, and my entire dress were covered in berry juices, so much so that my mother thought I was soaked in blood, so she let out this ear-piercing scream that scared the bejesus out of my poor father. He assured her that it wasn't blood I was covered in, but berry juice. They were so relieved I was in one piece, so much so they didn't even reprimand me for wandering off like that. There's an abundance of indigenous wildlife here, and I'm quite sure we'll see the deer tonight coming to the lake to have a drink when the sun begins to set. There's nothing like the sunset over the horizon, in its kaleidoscope of golds and oranges. You're just going to love it." "It sounds incredible," said Babs. "I can't wait to see it all. I brought my binoculars with me, so I fully intend to watch all the wildlife coming to the lake." Finally, Babs's red Jeep reached the all-expansive lake, and they parked it next to a couple of tall trees and began to set up their tent for the night. It was such a magnificently beautiful spring day, not too hot or too cold. The silvery lake shimmered in the mid-morning sun, while overhanging trees dipped their green, bushy toes into the water. There was an abundance of bird life roosting in the trees, chirping away, and Babs was delighted to see a mother duck and all her delightful little ducklings bobbing among the reeds. She counted over 12 ducklings to be exact. They were the cutest things she'd ever seen. There was a sizable wooden boathouse on the lake, where you could take out one of the rowing boats onto the water, and there was a large selection to choose from. The boathouse was remarkably well equipped, even with fishing gear and anything else besides that the Lakefield visitors might possibly need to use for their weekend breaks. There was also a large fishing pier, where you could indulge in a spot of fishing, along with a brick building that contained all the refrigeration and bathroom facilities you could possibly need. It would seem Veronica's uncle, Chris Wilton, had thought of absolutely everything and forgotten nothing. Babs was extremely glad to see there was no sign of the couple that was supposed to have booked the campground for the weekend, as no tent had been pitched around the lake, nor was there any sign of a car. So she began to secretly hope that she and Veronica might end up being alone for the entire weekend, and what could be better than that? The day that Veronica and Babs had spent together had been a magnificent one, and after rowing a boat across the lake and taking a casual stroll through the woods, Veronica had industriously got to work making a fire, and Babs was secretly very impressed. She could well believe her best friend had been coming here for years, as Veronica got that fire going like an absolute pro. Before long they were drinking piping hot tea together and eating pork sausages, potato and Greek salad. Babs had not eaten for a long time, but very suddenly her appetite was invigorated, and suddenly she felt so much better about her life and the future that stretched out before her like an unwritten white slate, with so much bountiful opportunity. As they were sitting on camping chairs, overlooking the lake, all of a sudden Veronica's cell phone rang. She glanced down briefly at the number, and was about to ignore the call, when the caller ID revealed it was her father phoning her. She put her cell phone on loudspeaker and whispered to Babs, "It's my dad." "Hi, Dad! This is a surprise. You never phone me. What's up?"
"Are you at Chris's camping ground?"
came her father's deep, husky voice.
"He told me you'd asked him if you could stay there with your friend."
"That's right, Dad. I'm here with Babs. We're having the most wonderful time together. The weather is absolutely perfect. There was supposed to be another couple camping here for the weekend, but they failed to show up, which I'm really pleased about. So we've got the entire place to ourselves, which is a real treat. Honestly, Dad, I don't know why people are so reluctant to camp here in early spring. I mean, it's the best time of the year to come here. So what if it gets cold at night? I mean, honestly, during the day, the weather is close to perfect. We even took a rowing boat out into the water earlier. Oh, and the bird life, Dad. It was magnificent. We saw some unusual birds, you know."
"Good, I'm glad to hear you're enjoying yourself, love. I just think you should know. Your mother had a nasty fall."
"Dad, you're scaring me. What do you mean a nasty fall?" said Veronica, sounding aghast. "How nasty exactly? What happened? Is she all right, Dad?"
"It's nothing to worry your pretty face about, love. So for goodness sake, don't you dare panic. Your mother's in hospital being evaluated. She hit her head hard and blacked out for a short while. She broke her wrist, sprained an ankle and bruised her upper lip, but I'm sure she'll be just fine enough. She's just in shock, though. I guess it could have been worse. So we have to be thankful, don't we, for small mercies."
"What the hell happened, Dad? How did Mum fall? It's not like her to be so ungainly. She's not inclined to be clumsy like that."
"Well, she wasn't clumsy exactly. No one could have anticipated your mother falling. It happened very quickly. Simon Gardner from next door happened to pop over at the rather inopportune time, you could say. He was coming over to give us some of his wife's homemade pickles. Deborah makes the most amazing pickles, as you well know. Anyway, you know what Colbert is like, good old Colbert. He began to bark excitedly, getting all frisky and, over-animated, you could say. He dashed to the front door like a great big guffoon. Sometimes that big goofy dog has no idea how huge he actually is. He's a cross between a St. Bernard and some other jumbo-sized breed. And, well, let's just say, if anyone was ungainly, it was Colbert. Your mother was going to answer the door. It all happened in a split second of time.
What happened, Dad? What did Colbert do?
Well, you know Colbert, in his unbridled enthusiasm, which dare I say is larger than he is, which is really saying something. He charged right into your mother. Didn't mean to, of course, but he was just so desperate to get to the door. I think he could tell that it was Simon Gardner on the other side, because dogs have a very good sense of smell, you know. So, as Simon often takes Colbert for a walk, with his wire-haired terrier Tutu, I guess he thought he was going to have another walk, and that Simon was coming to collect him. So he got terribly, terribly excited, tail wagging furiously, legs all over the place. You only have to say the word walk to Colbert, and he becomes crazed, doesn't he? Anyway, your poor mother. She was telling Colbert to be quiet, but that dog refused to listen. Just pushed into her. She lost her footing and went crashing down on the white and black tiles in our entrance hall. She fell flat on her face, I'm afraid to say, her head hitting the side of the wrought iron desk. She blacked out for a brief while from hitting her head against it. For a moment I thought she was dead. I'm not kidding either. She didn't respond when I tried to wake her up. I'm telling you, Veronica, I've never felt so affrighted in all my life,
said Mr. Wilton, his voice suddenly sounding rather flustered, as if remembering it all brought it all back.
I thought your mother was a goner for a moment, Veronica. It made me realize that I would be a very lonely man without her. That woman is the light of my life. But never mind that, she's going to be fine. And that's all that matters, isn't it?
Oh, Dad! Oh, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. You poor thing, you must have had quite the shock. I can't imagine what you went through, Dad, witnessing all that. And poor Mr. Gardner, I can't help feeling sorry for him, because he must have felt dreadful for coming around in the first place. Honestly, Dad, Colbert is the absolute end. But he's such a lovely dog at the same time. You can't be mad at him, can you? Is Mum going to be all right? What do the doctors have to say?
Well, the doctors are evaluating her, but they don't seem desperately concerned, which is good news. Your mother is in a dithery state. Never seen anything like it, actually. She's very confused and rather bewildered, you could say. She keeps asking after you. I've told her a plethora of times that you're camping, at Chris's camping ground. But your mother's memory is extremely vague. No sooner do I tell her that you've gone camping, she nods her head, and then a few minutes later she asks after you again. The doctor reckons she's suffering from a mild concussion. And, well, it's playing havoc with her short-term memory, it would seem.
If she's asking after me, Dad, then I better come to the hospital. I know it's over 2.5 hours to get back to Seattle, but I can do it, Dad. I mean, if Mum is asking for me, at least I should make an appearance at the hospital, don't you think?
That's not necessary, love. You're in Mount Rainier. You don't need to drive all the way here. I know your mother wouldn't want that if she wasn't in such a confused state of mind, that is. She'd be the very first to say that you should stay exactly where you are and enjoy your camping trip. I'm sure the fresh air and the exercise is doing you the world of good. How long are you staying there for?
Well, it's supposed to be a long weekend. Probably 3 days or possibly 4, depending on how we feel. But it's no train wreck missing a few lectures for both of us. And we can always get notes from Stacy.
Well, don't come all the way back here, love. It would be a complete wasted journey if you ask me. Your mum's going to be absolutely fine. But I will keep you posted as to what the doctors say about her condition. But the main thing is she's going to be right as rain in no time at all. And that's all that matters. It was important for me to keep you posted. I'm only grateful her head injury wasn't worse. I do so wish that Colbert wasn't so rambunctious. Your mother is a petite woman. She's fragile at times. And, well, he can be a formidable giant who's completely unaware of his size.
When Veronica had finished her phone call with her father, she looked at Babs. Look, I don't want to give up on this camping trip. I really don't. But I've had an idea. So hear me out, will you? I'm listening, said Babs. I'm so sorry about your mum, Veronica. The fall sounds pretty nasty. Well, Dad says it could have been worse, and it sounds like she's going to be all right. So it's nothing to fret about. You want to go back to Seattle, don't you? Said Babs, unable to disguise the disappointment in her voice, as they'd only just got here, and the thought of going all the way back to Seattle wasn't at all appealing. Well, not exactly. That wasn't what I was thinking. How about I leave you here, Babs, at the campground, so you continue to relax and enjoy yourself? I'll go home very quickly, visit Mum at the hospital, and I'll come back to you. Do you think you could manage staying here for the next 6 hours or so? But I'll be back, unless you want me to call it quits on this trip. But I think it would be a pity to do that. Don't you? It would be a dreadful pity, Babs agreed candidly. I mean, we've only just got here, haven't we? And I feel so relaxed. I haven't felt this good in ages. So the thought of going back to Seattle is rather daunting, and not a very welcome one exactly. But I understand if you need to go home, and I'm willing to pack up and go home with you and just forget this trip, if that's what we need to do. But if you're willing to continue with this trip, well, I'd be happy to stay here. If you're sure you don't mind driving back home and coming back here again. It's a lot for you to take on. Are you up to it? Absolutely. It'll put my mind at rest to see that my mother's all right. We could extend our time for a few days here, so my trip home and back, well, in the circumstances, it won't really be such a big deal. You really want to go all the way back to Seattle and come back again? Asked Babs. Yes, I do. I know it's an awful amount of travel, unnecessary travel at that. But I don't want to give up on this camping adventure. I'm beginning to enjoy myself, and I realise I need a break as much as you do. I just think I should look in on my mother. By the sounds of things, she's doing fine, which is a huge relief. I don't know what my father would have done if her injuries had been severe. He says Mum's asking for me, so I think I better just look in on her, don't you? If it puts your mind at rest, you definitely must go, Veronica, and see your mother. I would love to stay here if you don't mind, especially if you're only gone for a few hours. But don't rush back in a hurry. Take all the time you need, even if it means you're only back by tomorrow lunchtime. I appreciate that, Babs, but the main thing is, are you sure you'll be happy to be here alone, especially at night? There are a lot of people out there afraid of camping on their own. Well, the good news, Veronica, is I'm not one of them. I've got bear spray with me, and if I feel insecure, I can go and lock myself up in that big brick building with the toilet facilities and so forth. I'll be fine, don't worry about me. I certainly don't want to travel all the way back to Seattle and come back here again. That would be almost 5 hours on the road, and I couldn't bear that. I just haven't got the stomach to do it. But I'm enjoying myself here, and in truth, I haven't felt this happy in a long time. I really don't mind being on my own. I'll get plenty of sleep while you're away. Let's just say, since Russell broke up with me, I haven't been sleeping very well, so I need to make up for lost time. That's why you've got to stay here, Babs. I won't be long, I promise. I just want my mother to know I'm there for her. I'll keep you posted as to what is going on, but we can enjoy the rest of our long weekend together. I'm not giving up on this camping trip for the entire world, let me tell you. Little did Veronica Wilton know, after she hugged her best friend and climbed back into her bright red Jeep, that this would be the last time she'd ever see her friend alive. For it would never have occurred to her that in such a serene, sequestered place, such as the Lakefield camping ground, that something quite dreadful would soon unfold, that she'd never envisage happening in a million months of Sundays. In the years that were to follow, the mysterious mystery of her best friend's enigmatic disappearance would haunt her, bringing her a great deal of grief, and there would be times she would silently curse herself for choosing to go back to Seattle to see her mother, who turned out to be absolutely fine. She couldn't help but feel that had she remained with Babs at the camping ground, that her best friend would be alive and well. What had happened to her? Why had Babs vanished off the face of the earth? How she longed to know the answer to all those questions. Babs did not mind that Veronica had gone back to Seattle at all to see her mother in hospital. Veronica was fiercely close to her mother, and rarely felt she needed to make an appearance at the hospital, given her mother had been asking after her, even though her father assured her that her mother would be fine. Babs knew her friend would be back in a few hours, and at worst by lunchtime the following day. She had told Veronica to take as much time as she needed, for she was perfectly happy being at the campground alone. It meant that she and the indigenous wild animals would share the place together. Babs suddenly became conspicuously aware of the fact that she was utterly exhausted and extremely fatigued. It would seem all the energy had gone to her stomach, to digest the large volume of food she had ingested, that had made her stomach swell up like a little melon, for she had gobbled up her food like a half-starved animal. The sausages she had eaten had gone down favourably, because they had been cooked on an open fire, and they had been absolutely delicious, especially given she hadn't eaten for days. It's amazing how good food can taste when you haven't eaten in a long time, and also when you eat it al fresco. As Babs's father had always said, food cooked in the great outdoors was infinitely superior to food cooked on a stove, and he wasn't wrong about that. When Veronica left the camping ground, it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Babs zipped up the inside of her tent and slipped happily into her cosy sleeping bag, with her slimline torch and cell phone by her side. How glad she was to be able to lie down, and it was so cosy in the tent, but it was beginning to get significantly cooler as the afternoon began to roll towards early evening. The moment she lay down, she was out like a light, for sleep beckoned to her, and its alluring sweetness carried her off happily to the world of her dreams. Since she had come to the camping ground, she hadn't given her ex-boyfriend Russell so much as a passing thought. Veronica had been absolutely right about how a brief stint in the mountains could so effortlessly make you forget about all your troubles. The day had been sensational. The exquisite views over the silvery lake had knocked away the less than fragrant memories of the rather burdensome last few days. Babs didn't see the day finally fade away, like a dying alpine flower on the meadow. The blue sky turned gold, casting its shimmering tangerine glaze over the lake. She didn't see it become black as a raven's feathers, nor did she hear the trills of crickets and frogs serenading the early evening. She didn't hear the footsteps as someone set up a tent not too far away from where she and Veronica had pitched theirs, but she was abruptly awoken to a man's voice calling out, "Hello! Hello! Hello there! Is anyone at home?" And with that she heard a slapping sound on her tent, which made Babs suddenly aware that someone was out there, and this revelation made her feel both vulnerable and extremely uncertain. What the hell, she thought. Who had rudely thrust her out of her sleep? It had been a man's voice. It felt as if she'd been flung forward in the windscreen of her car in a head-on collision. Babs had been momentarily disorientated, somewhat confused perhaps, as she mentally tried to find her bearings. She briefly glanced around her in the darkness and realized she was in the tent at the Lakefield camping ground. So who was the stranger? It suddenly dawned on Babs that Veronica had told her that her Uncle Chris Wilton said that there was another couple that was expected to be camping at the Lakefield camping ground that evening. Maybe they had arrived here later than scheduled and set up camp, and she had not been aware of their presence, for she had been out for the count, catching up on some much-needed lost sleep. It was dark in the tent, but she fumbled around awkwardly for her slimline torch and for the bear spray, and she scrambled over to the zipper of the tent, pulling it open. She peered out of the opening to view the owner of the voice. It was dark out there, but with the light of the torch she saw the man very clearly. He was young and handsome, and she suddenly became very conscious of how dishevelled she looked. She tried to straighten her hair, and managed a shy, very demure smile. She did not feel threatened by the man. He looked to be a decent sort of fellow. Besides, he was probably here with his wife in the tent that they had recently erected. "Oh, hello," she said. "You gave me quite the shock. You must excuse me, but I've woken up from a deep sleep. I had no idea anyone else was camping here."
"I'm very sorry to tell you the truth. I was surprised to see a tent pitched by the lake, and no sign of a car anywhere. I wondered if anyone was actually around, and if the tent had somewhat been abandoned. I wouldn't have shouted so loudly if I thought someone was actually in the tent. I genuinely thought it was empty. I'm sorry to have so rudely woken you up."
"Oh, don't worry about that. You just gave me a start, that's all. I'm camping here with my friend Veronica Wilton. Her uncle Chris Wilton owns this campground, you see. She'll be here any minute. She just went off to get something." Babs had said this to make the man aware she wasn't here alone, although he didn't look like a threat at all. But then it didn't do any harm to make it appear that her friend would be around very shortly. The young man, she guessed, was approximately about 23 years old. He was extremely attractive, very good-looking. But Babs was not remotely interested in any men at the moment. She was still brooding over her relationship with Russell, and hoping with all her heart that they would soon get back together. "Is your wife in the tent with you?" she asked gingerly, expecting to see a young woman ferreting around the tent that had been positioned annoyingly close to theirs. What on earth was wrong with people? They had this whole campground to themselves, and this couple had the audacity to camp at such close quarters to their tent. She could see the man's fire pit was smoking, and she quickly picked up the delicious aromatic smell of barbecue meat on the wind. The smell made her suddenly feel very hungry again.
"No, I'm not married, I'm afraid," said the young man, almost regretfully. "I'm not with anyone on this trip. I broke up with my girlfriend only a couple of days ago. She'd have joined me on this trip if things hadn't turned so sour. We've always enjoyed camping together as a couple, but I decided, what the hell? Why not come here on my own regardless? Camping on your own can be a great deal of fun. It's good to get out in nature. You should have seen the animals earlier on this evening, gathering around the lake for a drink. It was a sight to behold, let me tell you."
"Oh, I'm sorry I missed that," said Babs. "I must have slept through it all."
"Well, don't miss out on it tomorrow, that's what I say. Incidentally, if you're interested, I've got lots of food on the grill. Why don't you join me? It's not fun eating on your own, you know. Oh, by the way, my name is Max McKeith."
Babs found her stomach was now beginning to rumble. She had eaten so much earlier on, but her appetite had come crashing back. It was tempting to accept this nice gentleman's offer, but should she? Was it a wise thing for her to do, given she was all alone on this campground? She didn't know this man from a bar of soap, but there wasn't anything about him that made her think she had anything to worry about, or that he was less than a gentleman. And the smell of that barbecue was utterly irresistible. What harm would it do to join him for a spot to eat? He was probably looking for some light-hearted conversation and good company, and there was no way he'd make any romantic overtures towards her. He didn't look the type. No, it would be fun to eat dinner with him. He seemed like a nice enough man. "My name's Babs," she said. "Babs Roxburgh. My friend's name is Veronica Wilton."
"Well, Veronica can join us for a bite to eat when she returns. I'm sure she will like to do so. She'd be most welcome."
"Well, she'll be gone for a short while, so I doubt she'll join us. But I would be glad to accept your invitation. I'm quite hungry, actually, and I must admit your barbecue smells absolutely amazing. It certainly saves me the trouble of starting up a fire on my own."
"Well, there you go. There's plenty of food going spare. I've cooked the most delicious spatchcock chicken, with peri-peri. Do you like peri-peri? You look like the kind of girl that enjoys spices."
"Well, I don't know what that means, but I do like my spices," said Babs. "I always enjoy heat in my food."
"Good, it's a deal then. said the young man. "I'll give you time to get refreshed, given I've only just woken you up from your sleep. I'll see you in a jiffy." His face broke out into a warm smile. "Come exactly as you are." Babs had absolutely no intention of joining the handsome stranger who called himself Max McKeith in the crumpled clothes that she was wearing. She would at the very least make a small effort to look halfway decent and respectable. She straightened herself out, slipping into a comfortable pair of jeans and sneakers. She ran a brush through her long, wispy blonde hair. She still looked a sorry sight, with dark crescent moons under her eyes, but the mountain air had brought a rosy glow to her cheeks, and was at long last ironing away the vacant look she had worn on her face for many days. It was with the guidance of her slim torchlight that she made her way to Max's tent. She decided to leave her cell phone behind, as she was sure that Veronica wouldn't be needing to get in touch with her for quite a while. Max was sitting comfortably on a camping chair. He had 2 other camping chairs erected around the fire pit, and courteously rose to his feet when Babs made her appearance. "Good, I'm so glad you decided to come," he said, greeting her with a warm smile, and beckoning for her to take a seat, which she did so gratefully. She was now very glad she had decided to join Max for dinner. He seemed friendly, and it was good to have company. "Please make yourself comfortable. Would you like a beer?" he said, pointing to the cooler. "I'm having one for sure." "No, thanks. I don't drink. But do you have something non-alcoholic, perhaps?" "I sure do. I've got quite a lot of Coke here. Would you like one?" he said, pulling a can out of the icebox and presenting it to Babs, who eagerly took it. "Coke would be lovely," she said, pulling back the ring pull and taking a grateful sip. She stared happily into the crackling flames of the fire and suddenly felt quite alive, swaddled by the dark night, as she listened contentedly to the background chorus of crickets and frogs, and glanced up at a velvety sky bejewelled with so many spectacular stars, far too many to count. Babs had found Max easy to talk to, and before long she was enjoying their casual, light-hearted conversation. She couldn't believe she had been reluctant to join him, as she could see his intentions towards her were completely honourable. She was surprised that he was also from Seattle and was studying engineering at university. Max was quite debonair, extremely handsome, and there was something about him that was quite charming and drew you right in. She was sure he had this magnetizing effect on all women, for he looked like he had possibly broken many women's hearts. Babs noticed that his loose, slightly curly dark hair that was tousled wildly around his face gave him that carefree, almost surfer boy kind of look. His eyes were as green as emeralds. She'd never seen eyes that green before, and they were the kind of eyes you could get lost in if you weren't careful. His honey-coloured skin spoke of a man that welcomed spending a lot of time in the great outdoors, and so Babs suspected he was probably a frequent visitor to the Lakefield camping ground, as there was so much to do here. Max was wearing a pair of longish khaki-coloured shorts, a green-coloured golfing shirt that seemed to bring out the green colour of his eyes, and a pair of walking boots. Max encouraged Babs to tuck in, and before long she was helping herself to platefuls of spatchcock chicken, served with baked potatoes, garlic bread and salad. The food was delicious, and she eagerly washed it down with some Coca-Cola, as she didn't fancy drinking alcohol. But she couldn't help but notice that Max was drinking down one beer after another, rather too quickly. If he carried on drinking like this, surely he'd get incredibly drunk, and that thought was a slight concern for her. She didn't fancy hanging around with a drunk person, but Max looked as if he could hold his own when it came to his drink. "So tell me about yourself, Babs. Is Babs your real name? I kind of like it. It's got a nice ring to it."
"No, my real name is Barbara, actually, but you know what people are like. They always tend to shorten your name, don't they? I can't remember anybody calling me Barbara, for that matter. I've got so used to being called Babs. I think if someone was to call me Barbara, I wouldn't even realise they were talking to me."
"You're definitely not a Barbara. Babs definitely suits you. I like it very much."
"Thanks," said Babs.
"So what do you do, Babs? I get the feeling you're a university student. Am I right, or am I right?" I can pick up on these things easily, you know. I'm quite astute, really.
Got it in a nutshell. I'm a university student. Guess what I'm studying?
Max chuckled. That's putting me on the spot, is it not? I'm not very good at guessing what people do.
Well, it was obvious to you I was a university student, so I wanted to see if it was obvious what I was studying.
You've got me, said Max. I'm not exactly sure.
I'm studying medicine, if you must know. I want to become a paediatrician, as I've always loved children. So much so, in fact, that I was torn between being a kindergarten teacher or a doctor, and I couldn't decide. So what I did was I threw a dice, and well, the dice landed on a 6, and that 6 meant that I should study medicine. So that's exactly what I did.
Max whistled. You threw a dice over whether to become a kindergarten teacher or a doctor? They're very different things, you do realise that?
Of course I realise that, which was why I threw the dice in the first place. Of course, everybody thought I was completely crazy doing that. But sometimes when you're struggling to make a decision, you need a little help, don't you? Anyway, I don't regret going into medicine. Veronica's also studying medicine, so we're at university together, which is pretty cool.
My ex-girlfriend Nicola was studying to become a doctor as well, he said wistfully. Her name's Nicola Penbridge, but she would be a year above you. You don't know her by any chance, do you? It's a small world if you do, that's for sure.
No, I'm sorry I don't know her, but I must admit the name Penbridge does ring a bell. It's a small world, you're right. How long were you together? Asked Babs. Well, that's if you don't mind me asking.
Of course I don't mind your asking. 3 years, to be exact, said Max, sounding almost sorrowful. You know, I thought she was the one, but it seems it just wasn't meant to be.
Babs felt as if she was speaking to a kindred spirit, someone who'd been through the same grief of breakup, so she could emphasize with Max's melancholia. Do you mind me asking you, Max, why things ended between you and your girlfriend? Or is that too personal? She asked, wondering why she'd been so bold to ask such a deeply personal question. But the words had come out before she'd been able to rein them in. Max studied her for a brief moment, and she was absolutely certain she'd seen anger in his eyes. Was she mistaken about that? Or had she come across as far too nosy, and he wasn't pleased about that? Then he said,
The evil bitch! That's what Nicola was, an absolute bitch! She told me it was over between us. Just like that. Can you believe it? She wouldn't give me a reason. It's one thing to break up with someone, isn't it? But when you give no explanation as to why you're ending things, it sucks, he said, slamming his beer furiously onto the camping chair. And the beer erupted into a fountain of white fizz, spilling all over the front of Max's green golfing shirt. Damn! Look what I've done to myself! Babs sat upright with a start, not expecting this seemingly nice gentleman to begin to rant about his ex-girlfriend like this, by calling her a bitch. That wasn't a nice thing to do, and Babs loathed swearing of any kind. It offended her. It would seem asking Max about his ex-girlfriend had been the wrong thing for her to do. It appeared to have fired him up, and Max became more and more angry, throwing a few empty beer cans that had accumulated at his feet. He gathered them up, crumpling them into balls, and began throwing them towards the lake, where they landed on the pebbly beach. Babs sincerely hoped he was going to pick up the mess he'd created. She certainly didn't want any of those tin cans to harm any of the fish or bird life at the lake. Babs could tell that Max had quite suddenly become inebriated. He was talking about his ex-girlfriend Nicola, and that appeared to have sent him right over the edge. She was such a bitch, Nicola was. A bitch! An absolute bitch! Why the hell did she dump me like that? What did I ever do to her? He said, raising his voice in indignation. Do you know, she didn't tell me why she was ending things, he repeated again. She gave me no explanation. No explanation. Did you hear that? No explanation. She said it wasn't working out. Can you believe that? What's that supposed to mean? What's not working out supposed to mean? I'm really sorry to hear that, said Babs. You know relationships.
They're very complicated. Look, it's getting very late, she said hurriedly, desperate to make herself scarce, as she felt very uncomfortable being around Max all of a sudden, especially while he was in such a cantankerous mood. I think I better be going. Thanks for the food, Max. It was absolutely delicious. I really enjoyed myself. Max charged towards her as she rose up from her camping chair.
But you can't go. Stay a little longer, will you?
He said almost pleadingly.
Look, I've got some chocolate graham crackers, marshmallows. We can make s'mores. I know every woman loves s'mores. Nicola did.
That's so nice of you to offer, and it sounds really lovely, very tempting, said Babs, her heart now pounding in her chest, because Max seemed all the more fired up, and he was giving her an intense look that was beginning to scare the bejesus out of her. She trembled awkwardly as she tried to make her excuses as best as she could. I really need to be going back to my tent. You know what? I'm suddenly so tired. It's been such a long day. Veronica will be back in any second. But it was lovely sharing your food, Max. It was nice to meet you as well. I really enjoyed myself.
You're fobbing me off, aren't you? That's what this is about. I'm not an idiot, you know.
Don't be ridiculous. Of course I'm not fobbing you off. As I was saying, I'm just very tired. I need to get back to my tent. Thanks for the lovely meal. You made the best spatchcock chicken I've ever tasted.
Don't go, please don't go,
said Max with pathetically pleading puppy dog-like eyes.
We were just beginning to have fun, weren't we? And I was enjoying myself in your company. I really like you, Babs. You're a beautiful woman, but then I'm sure everybody tells you that.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so, Max, but I really need to go, said Babs. Thanks for everything all the same. It's been such a lovely evening. Max grabbed her by the arm, squeezing her tightly, and then thrust his lips upon her. He smelt of beer, and was telling her how beautiful she was. Babs began to panic. Surely she'd not been given Max the wrong signals. Please, Max, stop. Don't. I'm not interested. If you must know, I'm involved with someone. It's not that it's you. It's not you. Of course it's not you. It's just I've got a boyfriend, she said, pushing Max away from her and trying to scurry away. But Max grabbed her and was now almost forcing himself upon her, pushing his lips onto hers. So much so that his teeth grazed her lips and blood began to trickle down her chin. She screamed out, "Stop it, Max! Stop what you're doing! Leave me alone! You're drunk! You don't know what you're doing!"
You bitch! You bitch! Said Max furiously. I'm going to get you for this.
And then to her astonishment he grabbed his hunting rifle and deliberately fired some bullets towards the lake. So they went shooting right past her. He began to laugh manically. Max grinned, holding the rifle in his hand and staring down at Babs.
Don't look so shocked. I wasn't going to kill you. I was firing my bullets at the lake. Now are you going to behave, Babs, so we can have a nice evening together? Or are you going to start playing up? I told you, I want you to stay.
Max looked down at his hands that were still clutching his rifle, as if he was challenging Babs to refuse him. Babs felt as if she was stuck between a rock and a hard place. If she turned down Max's amorous advances, he might start firing his rifle at her. On first appearances she had thought he seemed like an all-round decent gentleman, but now he seemed so unhinged, so dangerous. What was she to do? I mean, the way he was firing his rifle at the lake had been deeply troubling. What if he started firing at her? Babs gritted her teeth together uncomfortably, trying desperately to compose herself so that Max could not see the fear rising up in her eyes. I've got to go, Max, she said. She had been a fool to accept his invitation for a bite to eat. He had wanted more from her than she was prepared to give, especially after over-consuming way too many beers. Now he was incensed with Babs, especially since she was turning him down. How could she get out of this delicate, rather awkward situation without rubbing him up the wrong way? She was witnessing the same manic look she had once seen on her father, on the very evening he'd drunk far too much, and had gone charging after her mother, like a bull in a china shop. That had been the only time in Babs's life that she'd ever been scared of her father, for the alcohol had turned him into a raging lunatic, a man she didn't recognize. I need to get away from here, she thought. If I go back to the tent, well, Max could come after me, couldn't he? And then I'd have no way of escape. But if I run through the trees, maybe I could hide out somewhere until Veronica returns to the campground. And hopefully, by then, Max will have passed out from all the drink. Look, Max, I've got a boyfriend, she said as politely as she could. I can't get involved with anybody else. I can't possibly betray his trust. That would be wrong. I'm sure you appreciate that. I need to go. Max began to fire his rifle towards the lake, the noise of his bullets making Babs begin to shake, and her ears ring from the clamorous sound. There was a murderous expression on Max's face. You bitch! You're rejecting me like Nicola did! You'll pay for this! He said, turning around to stare at Babs. Then in a matter-of-fact tone of voice that had become significantly slurred, he said very nonchalantly, I'll put a bullet in your head. You won't get to see another day, Babs. You think I'm joking, do you? I'm not bloody joking. Look at me. Do you think I'm joking? Babs did not think Max was joking, not for a second. The drink had gone straight to his head. He was slurring and waving around his rifle rather manically. It was terrifying to watch. He had been firing shots just randomly at the lake, but she was absolutely certain he would turn his rifle on her. She didn't doubt that for a second. As he began to reload his rifle, Babs didn't hang around for a moment longer. She knew what to do, and with her torch in her hands, she began to run, down past the camping site towards the trees, at the speed of light. She was hoping Max would be too drunk to give her chase, that he'd fall over himself and be all clumsy and ungainly on his feet, like her father had done all those years before, when he'd lost his temper with her mother over absolutely nothing. She heard Max calling after her, Run all you like, Babs. You won't escape me, woman. I'm going to get you, and when I do, I'm going to blow your brains out. Ha ha ha! Babs began to run past the edge of the lake. She took a direct path through the trees, not daring to glance back over her shoulders, not even for a second, as such an effort would take up far too much time for her. Max was thundering after her, at the speed of a freight train. Babs knew in that quintessential minute that if he caught up with her, he would definitely kill her. The man was completely off his rocker, and although he was drunk, his physical stamina did not appear to be remotely impeded by the large amount of beer he had so liberally consumed. How was that even possible? You're a bitch! That's what you are, Babs! You're a bitch! You're no different to my ex-girlfriend. You women are all the bloody same, the whole damn lot of you. I'm not going to put up with being rejected again. Never! You hear that? I'm sick of being rejected. I'm sorry, woman, but what you've done has made me very upset, and you're not going to get out of the woods alive. Run all you like. I'll get you, bitch. You hear that? I'll get you. You'll be sorry, very sorry, for in the morning you'll be pushing up the daisies. Babs had no way of knowing how long she'd been running for, or where Max was, or how far he was behind her. It was too dark for her to see clearly, and her visibility, even with her slimline torch, was grossly impeded. Sweat saturated her forehead. It poured into her eyes, causing them to sting. She couldn't cry, even though the little girl inside her wanted to do just that. But emotions could not be engaged if you were fighting for your life against a formidable foe that you couldn't actually see, but you knew was there and was gaining ground on you. Babs knew she was completely powerless, helpless against the likes of Max, who was so much stronger and faster than she was, even in his inebriated state. In the cold light of day, would Max behave like this, she wondered. She seriously doubted it, but there was clearly something not completely right about him. He certainly had a temper on him, as volatile as a box of explosives. Tonight he was after her, like a pack of hounds after a helpless little red fox. Max had a hunting rifle with him, and he had made it profoundly clear. When he caught up with her, he'd blow Babs's brains out. Babs felt as if she'd been flung headfirst into the most horrendous nightmare, so everything seemed insanely surreal. Over the years she'd watched horror movies on television with Veronica at her side, her eyes wide with terror as she got caught up into the heart of the movie, which more often than not featured some deranged lunatic waving around a machete. Sometimes the horror movies had felt so real it had been difficult to get any sleep that night. Babs's mother would tell her that watching horror movies was a foolish thing for her to do, for it would give her grievous nightmares. But never in a million years did Babs think she'd actually find herself caught up in one. The adrenaline began to charge through her system, so she had run like the wind through the lofty maze of trees on this very dark, inauspicious night, where very little moonlight spilled through the open canopy. Her slimline torch was growing dimmer by the second, as if its battery was wearing thin. And Babs did not need her light to fail her, not tonight, as she was completely dependent on it. Babs began to feel her legs losing strength. She was completely breathless, as if not enough oxygen was getting into her lungs. Her heart pounded furiously in her chest, and her whole trembling body was caught up in a typical fight and flight response. Max was closing in behind her, for although she couldn't see him yet, she could almost certainly feel his presence, and she knew he would catch up with her very soon. She had to hide. It was her only chance to survive. Her strength was definitely waning, and she knew that she couldn't run any further. She had to give up. Babs scrambled under a thorny bush of briars, her skin screaming out in agonizing pain, as it was shredded so cruelly by hundreds of barbs that ripped right through her. But even though the pain was agonizing, Babs did not feel it. She was numb to everything, including her own emotions, for if she indulged in them, she'd have crumpled up like an old piece of paper. She could only hope that Max would not look for her under a bramble bush, but surely if it was covered in thorny briars, he'd never think to look for her there, and she was banking on him making that assumption. She held her breath as tightly as she could. Blood seeped from the deep scratches in her skin, trickling down her clothes, mixing with her sweat. Then she heard Max's boots pounding over the forest floor. Oh my God, he was coming! He was coming! She could even smell him before she even saw him. A mixture of sweat mixed with beer. She could see the fierce light of his torch breaking through the darkness like an obtrusive, all-invasive spotlight that appeared to swallow up the dark shadows as it broke its leering gaze through the trees. "Please don't see me," she inwardly cried. "Please, please don't see me." Babs lay flat on the ground, her nostrils filled with the smell of the damp earth. She held her breath, and then it happened. Babs' worst, most terrible fears were confirmed when she heard the slur of Max's triumphant voice. "Ah, there you are. You thought I wouldn't find you. Silly woman. You underestimated me. You gave yourself away, snagged a bit of your shirt on a bramble. But big prizes for thinking of a clever place like this to hide. If you'd been a little bit more shrewd, perhaps I wouldn't have found you. But it's too late for recriminations. Far too late. I've got you now, haven't I?" A big hand grabbed her by the leg and yanked her out from under the bramble bush, where still more thorns ripped unapologetically through her flesh. Babs found herself lying flat on the forest floor, with a bright torchlight being thrust invasively into her face. It was so blinding that she was struggling to see the green eyes that leered down at her. They glared down at her with an expression of unbridled hatred coupled with intense loathing. Max was looking at her as if she was a cockroach that he seriously wanted to expunge by squashing with his boot or spraying with some poison spray. "Go on, beg for your life," he taunted, kicking her in the chest with his boot, so that the pain scorched through her body with a burning spasm. "Beg for your life. You know, I've never killed a human before. I've killed deer, rabbits, coons, but never a woman. First time for everything." He put the hunting rifle on her head and taunted her. "Please," she sobbed. "Please, Please, Max, don't do this. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. I've got a mother and I've got family. Please, please don't do this. But Max did not listen. The next thing was that a shot sounded, and Babs's world became completely black, and it was all over for her. Stupid, stupid bitch, said Max, satisfied that the woman who had rejected him had now suffered the full consequences of her actions. He kicked her dead corpse with an expression of great disgust on his face. We could have had a nice evening together, but no, you had to ruin it, didn't you? 7 years later, Shelley Fenugreek could not believe how her luck had changed. Her life was barely recognisable to the life she'd known only 3 weeks before. Who would have thought that a random trip to the doggy park, where she'd taken her grandmother's white Maltese poodle Sophie for a walk, would have resulted in her meeting the man of her dreams? Shelley had never been a big romantic, far from it in fact. She knew only too well your life didn't pan out like it did in the movies, or like some of those romantic fiction books her sister Eloise lapped up so eagerly. If the truth be told, Shelley's dogged scepticism about relationships had meant that she'd almost subconsciously repelled men, without meaning to do so, almost as if there was a keep away sign pinned on her person, for she'd always appeared to be unlucky in love, and her relationships with men never amounted to very much, nor did they go past the first trimester. They just seemed to fade away, like a sparkler that lights up suddenly. It's magnificent for a brief moment, but then it abruptly dies, its spark remembered no more. That's exactly what relationships were like for Shelley. By now her older brother Morris was a happily married man, with a 2-year-old boy called Denny, while her younger sister Eloise, the perennial romantic in the family, had got married 5 years earlier, and still appeared to be hopelessly and madly in love with her husband. And she was now expecting her first baby in a couple of months' time. It was almost as if the romantic fiction Eloise had consumed so passionately as a young girl had hardwired her to believe that life in the real world rarely was a bed of roses, and maybe having an optimistic outlook, such as hers, had served her well. As they do say, you create your own reality, and it would seem that Eloise's love life was certainly like something written in a book of romantic fiction, and even her husband was so incredibly handsome, and he seemed to play the perfect role of a romantic hero. Growing up, Shelley had laid into Eloise hard, mocking her unkindly over her obsession with romantic fiction, which she thought was far too overindulgent. In those days, Eloise could easily be found lying across her bed, her nose tucked very happily into a romantic novel. Shelley had told her sister that she was very sorry to inform her, but no tall, dark stranger was ever going to whisk her away on a big black horse and take her to his fairy tale castle in the sky. It doesn't work like that in the real world, she had informed her sister, almost enjoying seeing the look of hurt discharge itself across Eloise's face. It had irritated Shelley profusely that her whimsically naive sister seemed to build fanciful castles in the air with all her daydreaming. Indeed, Eloise was such a dreamer that even the teachers at the school had complained about Eloise always seemingly to have her head in the clouds. Yet if the truth be told, Eloise and Morris had left her far behind, as if Shelley was still waiting at the bus stop for the man of her dreams to arrive. But the bus stop remained empty day after day, as if Shelley was still waiting at the bus stop for the man of her dreams to arrive. But the bus stop remained empty, as if she'd been permanently stood up. Shelley's grandparents had been responsible for raising all 3 of their late son's children, as both of their parents were tragically killed in a small plane crash when flying over the Kenyan wilderness to join a group of tourists who would be watching the Great Migration across the Serengeti. But it was not to be. As to why the plane had crashed, no one knew the answer to that question, and investigations appeared to be ongoing, with no answers ever found. It was after their parents' tragic deaths that the Fenugreeks had taken legal guardianship of their 3 grandchildren. Morris was the oldest sibling, and had been 6 years old when his parents had sadly died. But even his memories of them were fleetingly vague, although at the time he'd taken the news of his parents' demise extremely badly. So for the 3 fenugreek children, they'd never felt the true devastation of losing their parents, for their memories of them had been at best very scant. Their grandmother, Alice Fenugreek, had done everything in her power to keep the children's memories of their parents alive, by showing them photographs and telling them stories. But when Shelley had turned around one day and said very candidly to her grandmother, "We don't remember our parents, Granny Alice. You and Grandpa Bobby have always been our parents to us," it was then that Alice realized that trying to bring the dead back to life as far as her grandchildren were concerned was never ever going to work. All 3 of Alice Fenugreek's grandchildren could not have been more different. Morris had always been the sensible, pragmatic one. He'd always been sports-orientated and was brilliant at school, excelling in all his grades. He had grown up with a passion for animals, most especially the indigenous wildlife native to the Americas. In so many ways, Morris rather reminded Alice of her son that she had lost so tragically in that small plane crash. It would seem the older that Morris became, the more he reminded Alice of her late son. Now that Morris had left home and was married with a child, he had become a very successful veterinary surgeon, with a special interest in wild animals, and as a consequence, the young family were living close to Mount Rainier, where there was an abundance of wildlife. So many injured animals were brought to him, and money raised by an animal charity was used to help the treatment of the natural wildlife in the area. Alice Fenugreek's youngest granddaughter, Eloise, who had always been a delightful child growing up, with a wild, fanciful imagination that Alice had always found rather endearing. Growing up, Eloise had been such a feminine child. She had loved to dress up in her grandmother's clothes, and study her reflection at great length in the mirror, long and hard. She'd plaster her face with lipstick, drape herself in her grandmother's pearls and beady necklaces, and place her tiny feet into her grandmother's high wedge heels, and she'd stagger around the place, tripping over the hems of her grandmother's long dresses. As Eloise got significantly older, she became passionate about fashion, and was very skilled with a sewing machine, making all her own dresses, where she'd brought Victorian clothes into the 21st century with an avant-garde flair. Eloise was now as a consequence running a fashion boutique in Seattle, where she sold some of her amazing creations to a very affluent clientele with a select taste. For as long as Alice could remember, her granddaughter had been passionate about romantic historic fiction. Sometimes her obnoxious sister Shelley would tease her tirelessly about this, because she would tell her over and over again that the world was not made out of cotton candy. At the time, Alice Fenugreek had privately thought Shelley was absolutely right, and that one day Eloise's heart would be badly broken, and she'd get a rude awakening when her first relationship blew apart. Eloise had surprised them all. She had come home one day from town with a huge smile on her face, announcing that she had met her Prince Charming, and that he was no doubt in her mind the one for her. "I was sitting there in the coffee shop, having a hazelnut latte, would you believe?" she told her grandmother. "And lo and behold, this really handsome man comes up to me, Granny, and he told me I had such a beautiful smile. Can you believe that? He was ever so nice to me, a perfect gentleman he was, and so well spoken. He asked if he could buy me another hazelnut latte, so I said why not. We talked for ages, Granny. He's the one for me. I'm telling you, he's the man I'm going to marry. I knew it the moment I saw him. I'm going to see him tomorrow evening. He's picking me up for dinner." Lo and behold, Eloise's relationship with Montgomery Pearson had played out like one of the romantic pieces of fiction her granddaughter had tirelessly read, and within a year of regular dating, the couple had tied the knot and got married, and Eloise had never been happier. Granny Alice was extremely concerned about Shelley, for she was the one that seemed to be left behind, like the fledgling that refused to leave its mother's nest. Granny Alice had always believed that Shelley's scepticism was a healthy one, for it prepared her for the holes in the road along your journey in life, so that if adversity came to strike you down, you were well prepared for it. In reality, Shelley had not had any long-lasting relationships with men, and had not really found any direction in her life, almost as if she was feeling her way around the world, like a mole in the dark, and never finding the right tunnel that would lead her directly to the light. Shelley was working 3 days a week at an art gallery in town, and when she wasn't working she'd help Granny Alice around the house, for she was not in a position to leave their leafy green Seattle neighbourhood, where she resided with her grandparents, for the prices of apartment rentals were far too costly to consider leaving home. Granny Alice loved having Shelley around the place, but how she wished with all her heart her granddaughter would meet someone who would sweep her off her feet. Then it happened on an unassuming afternoon, when Shelley had been walking Granny Alice's Maltese poodle Sophie at the doggy park. It was on Shelley's walk at the park that she observed a very handsome man walking his enormous black dog. It looked to be a mixture between a Great Dane and a Labrador, although she couldn't entirely be sure what it was, but it was nevertheless enormous in size and shape, and seemed to be all legs. All of a sudden the handsome man was thrown to his feet, losing control over the lead, and the Herculean-sized dog, dragging the lead behind him, began charging ebulliently towards little Sophie, like those greyhounds on a racing track. Shelley wanted to scream, for she was sure that Sophie's life was over, and that this huge dog's monstrous jaws would be tearing the Maltese apart in any second. Sophie, sensing the size of this great monstrosity hurling towards her, began to cower nervously behind Shelley's leg, and began to whimper. And then there was the dog, greeting Sophie like a long-lost beloved friend, and covering her with big sloppy licks. Sophie stopped cowering at once, and she and the big dog began chasing each other around the park, as if they had been best buddies forever. "Oh, I'm very sorry about this," said the handsome man, coming up to Shelley with a sheepish smile on his face. "I didn't anticipate all this. I was just walking in the park, and then the next thing I'm thrown off my feet, and I lost control of the lead, I'm afraid." "What were you thinking? You should have been holding on to the lead properly. He's a huge dog. My dog was absolutely terrified."
"But look at them now," said the young man. "They're all over each other, are they not? And you can see they've bonded instantaneously."
"Even so, it could have been a different story, couldn't it? I mean, your dog, if you don't mind my saying so, is built like a miniature horse. He's massive. And the way he hightailed it over here was alarming. I thought he was going to tear little Sophie apart. I really did. It was a very scary event."
"I must apologize for all that. He's not my dog. He belongs to my boss. I take him out for a walk often. I usually hold the lead very lightly. He's a big soppy dog, you see. Not a bad bone in his entire body. But recently Mr. Thornbrier's little white Maltese poodle passed away, I'm afraid. I hasten to say she was a dead ringer for your dog. Her name, believe it or not, was also Sophie. And I guess when Heathcliff saw your dog, he thought his best friend had returned from the dead. I mean, look how incredibly excited he is."
"Are you kidding me?" said Shelley, her face expressing extreme surprise. "This is my grandmother's dog. Her name's Sophie." Shelley's face suddenly broke out into a broad grin. "I think they like each other, you're right. They are bonding."
"They sure are. Although I think Heathcliff thinks Sophie over there is a popsicle, don't you?" He chuckled. "He's licking her within an inch of his life. My name's Max, by the way. Max McKeith. And you are?"
"I'm Shelley," she said, finding her eyes meeting the perfect green eyes that were now making her legs wobble. This man was so extraordinarily handsome, and he was making her heart flutter, and no one had ever done that to her before. She was behaving like one of those pathetic characters in her sister's mushy novels. It was ridiculous.
"How about I buy you an ice cream to make up for Heathcliff's very bad behaviour?"
said Max, pulling a funny face, which had made Shelley laugh. Good-looking and funny too. This man had it all.
"I'll even buy an ice cream for Sophie, given Heathcliff has licked her within an inch of his life. How about that?"
"Well, now you come to mention it, an ice cream would be absolutely lovely," Shelley had said. "I like vanilla bean myself, dipped in chocolate. Sophie will have the same, minus the chocolate, of course."
"Well then, 2 vanilla beans coming up,"
said Max, giving her a wink. She had been unable to believe how she and Max had hit it off, and much like her sister Eloise, she had had a feeling, a very strong feeling, that she had met the one. She couldn't believe she was actually feeling this way. It was an incongruous experience for her, because she was not emotionally indulgent by nature. She had prided herself in being unabashedly skeptical about love, until now. Maybe the tide had rarely turned for her. And if the truth be told, she'd never met anyone like Max before. They had agreed to meet up the following afternoon at the doggy park again. Shelley couldn't wait to return home to Granny Alice and to Grandpa Bobby to tell them about the extraordinary rendezvous in the park that she had had with the most handsome stranger. "He's so nice, Granny. He's got the most beautiful green eyes, dark brown hair as well. I know this is crazy, and I'm sounding exactly like Eloise, and the last person I want to sound like is my sister, who I unkindly ridiculed for being such a romantic. But I think Granny Alice, Max McKeith might just be the one. I feel it in my gut, as crazy as it sounds. And it helps that he's so easy on the eye, let me tell you. Goodness gracious me, love. I don't know what to say. You say his boss's dog Heathcliff couldn't get enough of our Sophie, and that Heathcliff lost his best friend, who was also a white Maltese called Sophie. What are the chances of that happening? I think the universe has a very big sense of humour, don't you? What do you think about this, Bobby?" she said, turning to her husband. "It's extraordinary," Bobby admitted, with a satisfied grin on his face. "I hope it works out for you, Shelley, like it did for your brother and sister. Mind you, you haven't had the best track record with relationships, have you?" "Don't be so rude, love," said Granny Alice. Granny Alice had not known what to make of her granddaughter's story. She should have been excited to hear that Shelley had finally met someone. She had been wishing that this would happen a long time ago. And judging by the romantic way the couple had met at the doggy park, their meeting seemed magically serendipitous, as if it had been divinely ordained. But something felt off for Alice, like a deep niggling feeling inside her, that hinted that this was a love story that would not have a happy ending. Why she felt this way she didn't know. And in the beginning she didn't share her doubts with her husband Bobby, because she knew he would think her gut instincts were absolutely ridiculous. And in truth they probably were. "Don't be silly," Granny Alice told herself very sternly, almost as if she was chastising a small child for such rude thoughts. "Why are you indulging in such pessimistic thinking like this? What is wrong with you, Alice Fenugreek? You haven't even met the young man yet, and you've already decided that there's something terribly wrong with him." Of course Granny Alice did meet Max, when she finally invited him around for dinner one night to join the family, as she was eager to make his acquaintance, given how much Shelley had raved about him. Max McKeith had been the perfect gentleman, but Alice again could not shake off the feeling that there was something about Max she didn't like, almost as if there was a dark, insidious side to his character that he'd kept well hidden from everyone. Once again she told herself she was talking absolute nonsense. Max was absolutely perfect for Shelley, in every possible way, and it was blindingly obvious that they were both head over heels in love with each other. Why could she not be happy for her granddaughter, like she had been happy and delighted for both Morris and Eloise? It would seem Alice's niggling doubts would not abate, and there were nights she would dream of her granddaughter lying in an open grave, with Max hovering above it with a spade, looking down on her granddaughter's deceased corpse with a manic, almost deranged grin on his face. Alice Fenugreek had never had lucid dreams such as this before, but when she shared the troubling dream with her husband, he told her she was having a nightmare, and that her dream had meant absolutely nothing. Alice, of course, was not so sure, and felt a horrible sense of dis-ease, almost as if the dream was some kind of prognostication that she was loath to do anything about, unless of course she wanted to alienate her beloved granddaughter, who seemed to think that pink cherry blossoms grew out of Max McKeith's backside. She wouldn't have had a bad word said against him. Within weeks Alice was alarmed to see that the relationship between her granddaughter and her new boyfriend had grown very strongly. And then one day Shelley returned home, wearing a big sapphire and diamond engagement ring, along with a huge smile on her face that told it all. She announced very proudly to her grandparents that she was engaged, and Alice had pretended to be thrilled for her, as what else could she do? Grandpa Bobby really liked Max when he'd first met him, and thought Shelley and Max made a great couple. He couldn't understand why his wife had nursed misgivings over him, just because of a silly nightmare she had had, which had meant nothing. But he thought that maybe Alice didn't want her remaining grandchild leaving home for good. That must be what this is all about, he concluded to himself. The house will become very lonely without our grandchild around, and it will be tough for my Alice. I'm very happy for you, Shelley. It's about time the man popped the question, said Grandpa Bobby. I've been waiting for some good man like Max to sweep you off your feet, he said, throwing his arms around Shelley and enveloping her in a big hug. Isn't this wonderful news, Alice? He said, turning to look at his wife. Alice's expression appeared to be vacant. Her face had grown pale, and there was a far-away, distant look in her eyes that seemed almost melancholic. Love, you're away with the fairies, he said, waving his hands in front of his wife's eyes, as if to bring her back to reality. I was saying, love, isn't this wonderful news for Shelley? That she's engaged, I mean. Oh, of course it's wonderful news, said Alice, seemingly to suddenly come out of her trance. She gave her granddaughter a half-hearted smile, but the smile refused to meet her eyes. Her heart was aflutter with trepidation, for something in her had warned her that this engagement was not good news. But she knew she had to keep such thoughts all to herself. Just so you know, Granny, I won't be here over the weekend, said Shelley excitedly. I'm going to the Mount Rainier area with Max. He's taking me to his favourite camping ground there. It's a place called Lakefield Camping Ground, which he frequented a lot as a child. He said it's absolutely amazing. It's privately owned. Not many people know about the place. There's a beautiful lake there, alpine fields of flowers, groves of evergreen trees, walking trails, and incredible views over Mount Rainier itself. Are you going to look in on your brother Morris, given you're going to the Mount Rainier area? Morris lives there, you know. I'm sure he and his wife would be delighted to see the both of you. You could introduce them to Max, couldn't you, then? No, I don't think there'll be any time for any of that. I'll look in on Morris another time, perhaps. Alice Fenugreek really wanted to be happy for her granddaughter, being engaged to such a handsome man who was taking her to the mountains. She involuntarily grabbed her granddaughter by the arm, in an impromptu moment of impulse, as a shiver of dread ran down her spine. She squeezed her granddaughter's arm so tightly, so much so that Shelley quickly retracted her arm. Ouch, Granny! That hurt! Oh, I'm so sorry, love. What is it, Granny? She said, looking up at her grandmother in surprise. You don't seem happy about my engagement to Max. I thought you'd be delighted when all three of your grandchildren are happily settled down. Why do I get the funny impression you don't like Max? He's the whole package, Granny. But I don't think you've ever warmed to him, not even a little. I'm not blind, Granny. I saw the funny look you gave him. Of course I'm happy for you, love. I'm concerned this relationship with Max, well, it's been a little whirlwind. Well, it's been fast, hasn't it? A whirlwind romance, perhaps. And now you're engaged. Everything's happening very fast. I would have expected this from your sister Eloise, but not from the likes of you. You've always been the one that's so astute, so level-headed. I thought you would date the man for a long time, a couple of years perhaps, before you tied the knot. In my opinion, that would have been a wise decision for you to make. Rushing into things like this can be a dreadful mistake. This has been so terribly fast. I'm just saying, love, you need to be careful, that's all. But, Granny, I love Max. I knew the moment I met him he was the one, just like Eloise did when she met her husband. It worked out for her. Why shouldn't it work out for me? Can't you be happy for me, Granny? Don't mind me, love. Don't listen to a word I say. I'm an old lady that doesn't know what she's talking about. My problem is I'm far too overprotective over my grandchildren. I just want the very best for you, that's all. I hope you have a wonderful time at the campground, celebrating your engagement. If you're happy, love, then so am I. That's all I can ever ask for.
That's all I want for my grandchild, is for her to be fulfilled and happy with her life. And if Max ticks all your boxes, then who am I to complain?"
Shelley rarely loved the Lakefield camping ground, for it had exceeded her greatest expectations. She couldn't believe it was so empty. There were no other campers around, but Max had assured her that was always the case in early spring, and he reckoned it was his favourite time of the year to go, even though it got profoundly chilly at night.
"I don't think people like to book the campground so soon after winter, you know. I suspect they're rather worried the nights will be too cold for them. But in my book this is the best time of the year to come to the camping ground, as you have the entire place to yourself. Granted, the nights can be chilly here, but provided you wrap up warm, it really isn't a big deal. Besides, the campground offers you as many blankets as you like."
Shelley couldn't remember a time that she'd felt more happy. She glanced down proudly at the sapphire and diamond ring on her finger, and then over at the exquisite beautiful lake that was glistening in the noonday sun, reflecting on its shimmery surface all the trees that were bowing over the water's edge. In the furthest distance, she observed the imposing silhouette of Mount Rainier, resplendently enrobed in a carpet of white snow, like a magnificent ice queen. She thought in that second how incredibly lucky she was to be here, with the most wonderful man in the entire world, who would soon become her husband. Why had she been such a doubting Thomas in the reality of true love? What a stroke of luck that she had serendipitously run into Max at the doggy park. When she had told her sister the story, Eloise had shrieked with absolute delight, saying that it was all so incredibly romantic. The only niggling thought that had sabotaged a little bit of Shelley's joy was her grandmother's ominous words.
"I'm just saying, love, just be careful, that's all."
They seemed to hang around in her head, rather like a misplaced Christmas decoration that doesn't belong on a tree. She glanced up at her magnificent fiancé, who flashed her a beautiful smile, and came over to wrap his arms lovingly around her, enveloping her in a warm hug.
"So what do you think about this place?"
he asked her, his green eyes meeting hers. "It's magnificent," were the only words that Shelley could utter. "I don't think I've ever camped in a more idyllic place. The day has been so wonderful, hasn't it?" The couple had thoroughly enjoyed rowing across the lake with a rowing boat that they had found in the boathouse. Max had done a spot of fishing on the fishing pier and caught a couple of reasonable-sized trout, along with another strange-looking fish that they both decided to throw back into the water, as Shelley wasn't sure what the fish was, and she didn't fancy eating an unnamed fish. Shelley and Max had sashayed happily hand in hand across the alpine field, bespeckled with the most dazzling, glorious wild flowers, the likes of such Shelley had never seen before, that were industriously being pollinated by bees and all kinds of glorious butterflies of every available colour. Max had picked up some wild flowers for his fiancée and put a couple in her hair, and told her adoringly how pretty she looked, and in that moment Shelley felt deliriously happy. "I'm so lucky to have you, Max," she said. "I really mean it. I'm lucky to have met you." Max had lifted up her delicate chin to his face and said,
"No, I'm the lucky one. There are some things about me, if you knew, Shelley, well, you'd probably run a mile."
Shelley had looked at Max, her heart bursting with love for him. "There's nothing you could ever say, Max, about yourself that would make me love you less." And when she said that, she had meant every word of it.
"You mean that?"
said Max, his face lighting up as he drew her into another warm hug. "Of course I mean it. I love you, Max," Shelley had said. That evening Max got to work, preparing a fire pit. He began cooking the 2 trout they had caught earlier on in the day, along with a spatchcock chicken and some lamb kebabs over the flames, and the aromatic smells of the sizzling meat made Shelley extremely hungry. The 2 of them sat together side by side, tucking into big wedges of garlic bread dripping with butter, and meat that was so tender it was falling off the bone. And as for the fresh fish that they had caught, Shelley had never tasted fish so good. It had been a sensory experience in every sense of the word. Shelley licked the sticky juices off her fingers and contentedly stared at the crackling flames of the fire pit, that had almost locked her into a soulful trance. She couldn't remember a time when she felt this happy or content. "I love it out here," she said wistfully, glancing up at the sky that was now covered in stars. "I've never seen anything so spectacular before. The Milky Way is reflected on the water. Oh, I know I keep going on. I keep sounding like a broken record, don't I? But I'm so glad I found you, Max. Honestly, I really am. If we hadn't met, my life, well, it would be so tediously dull, let me tell you. I would still be living with my grandparents and working at the gallery. I'm still working at the gallery, but now I've moved in with you. I always said that love stories belonged in fiction books, but now I know true love is definitely real. You've made a believer out of me, Max. Growing up, my sister Eloise would read love stories all the time. She particularly loved historical fiction, and one of her favourite books was Jane Eyre. I'd tell her that her romantic aspirations bore no resemblance to real life. I was such a big cynic back then, all about love, of course, until I found you, Max. And so now Eloise is telling me I told you so. She's been mercilessly teasing me for being such a doubter. I know we haven't been together for very long, Max. But when you know, you know.
Never a truer word was ever spoken, said Max. When Heathcliff came bolting towards your grandmother's Maltese poodle, Sophie, whom you thought was about to be devoured, when I saw you for the very first time looking so flustered, I was blown away by you. In that second I thought she's the one for me, and it turns out I was right about that.
Shelley giggled. You thought that when you saw me? You never said.
Well, there's some things you don't say when you just meet someone, do you? If I'd told you how I felt there and then, I'd have scared you away.
Not a chance. Never, said Shelley, shaking her head. You could never scare me away, Max. Never. Max looked at Shelley soberly, and then a very serious expression seemed to develop on his face. Then he said rather gingerly, You know when you were saying earlier that there was nothing I could have done in my past that would make you love me less? Did you really mean that, Shelley? I mean, really, really mean it? But of course I meant every word of it, said Shelley. I've done some stupid things in my past that I deeply, deeply regret, like the way I teased my sister so incessantly. Who hasn't? And I'm sure you have too. But those things are behind us now. We have the future to look forward to, don't we? I'm sure anything you may have done, Shelley, was not as bad as what I've done. I bet you've never killed a person before, have you? Shelley's eyes widened. Her blood ran cold. She let out a self-soothing chuckle, not knowing what to do. Had she heard her fiancé right? Was he implying that he'd actually killed a person? Of course he wasn't. Why, the very idea was absolutely ludicrous. Max was teasing her, that's what this was, to see how she'd react. Of course I haven't killed anyone, Max. Have you? She joked, trying to make light of the conversation that was becoming increasingly heavy. There was a dark, faraway look in Max's eyes that suddenly scared her. Did her fiancé have a dark secret, she wondered? Had he actually killed someone? Please, God, no. Don't laugh, Shelley. I'm being deadly serious, said Max. We're getting married, are we not? And I, for one, don't want there to be any secrets between the two of us. Don't you agree? I mean, when you marry, you become one flesh, do you not? What exactly are you saying, Max? Asked Shelley, her heart beginning to twist in a tangle of knots, while nausea began to rise up in the back of her throat, so she was beginning to taste the spatchcock chicken she had eaten earlier. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Have you killed someone, Max? I have, said Max, very matter-of-factly. As he said this, he took a great big gulp of Mountain Dew and made a rather unfortunate burp. What, a hit and run or something? Asked Shelley. You knocked someone over in the road, is that what you did? You were young at the time. You fled from the scene. I've heard of stories like that, and I can understand, why it happens, because people get frightened. I could forgive something like that. I mean, you should have come forward, of course, and admitted what you'd done. Pat, I guess you were just very young at the time. It's understandable, isn't it? I mean, it was an accident. The main thing was it was an accident.
It wasn't an accident, Shelley. I need you to understand I killed someone. But I didn't mean it. I was drunk. My temper when I'm drunk, it gets inflamed. That's why I don't drink anymore. That's why I'm teetotal. You've often asked me why I don't drink alcohol. Now you know the reason. I don't like what I become when I drink alcohol. It's like there's a demon inside me, and I lose complete control over myself. But when I'm stone cold sober, and I look back at my behaviour, I don't recognize myself at all. That's what happened in this case. I lost my temper, and things went too far. I got carried away. I was in a dark place emotionally at the time. My ex-girlfriend Nicola had dumped me out of the blue. So I was miserable, and I guess I just snapped when another pretty woman rejected me as well. Things just got on top of me, and I overreacted.
Who did you kill? Asked Shelley, her ears now burning, for she couldn't believe what Max had just confessed to. The man of her dreams was not so dreamy after all.
Her name was Babs. It happened 7 years ago, at this very same campground, I'm afraid to say.
Shelley's face drained of all colour. It went a ghostly white. You mean you brought me to the very same camping ground where you killed this woman? But why did you kill her, Max? Why? Help me to understand. Max shrugged his shoulders. For a moment he looked like a small boy. His green eyes seemed to smoulder with a deep regret, as if he wished he could go back in time and undo the damage he had so obviously done.
As I was saying, I was at rock bottom in my life at the time. I need you to believe me on this, Shelley. I'd been in a relationship, a very loving relationship with a woman I adored. And then one day she broke up with me, without any explanation whatsoever. I was heartbroken, absolutely devastated. We were supposed to come to this campground for a weekend together in early spring. I was going to propose to her when we got here, but she broke up with me before I ever got the chance to pop the question. I really did think she was the one. I was very upset because this ex-girlfriend of mine, Nicola was her name, gave me no reason at all, why she'd ended things with me so abruptly, and that really sucked. I'd been coming to this campground for many years with my parents when I was a little boy. I then decided that rather than drowning my sorrows at home and feeling all sorry for myself, I should come out to this campground on my own without my girlfriend, which is what I did. I was expecting to be the only camper here, but I was surprised to see someone had pitched a tent by the lake. There was no sign of a car around on the campground, which I found rather odd. I approached the tent, expecting it to be empty. I asked if anyone was around, and that was when I met Babs for the first time. Her real name was Barbara, but everyone called her Babs.
So you didn't even know this girl you killed? How the hell did this happen? Said Shelley, her whole body shuddering in horror to hear her fiancé talking so candidly about such a heinous, devastating event.
Well, I'd set up a fire pit like I have done tonight, and I was cooking a lot of food, and spatchcock chicken was on the menu as well. I encouraged Babs to join me for a meal. She was an attractive young lady, who was also from Seattle. We had a lot in common. Turned out she went to the same university that Nicola did, although she was a year behind Nicola, actually. She was younger than me. We got talking, and I guess I got a little fresh with her. I had been jilted by my ex, and I guess I was hoping this woman would find me attractive, and that we could, have a romantic time together. So I could put Nicola behind me once and for all. But no such luck.
What do you mean you got a little fresh with her? Asked Shelley. Be more specific, will you, Max?
Well, I tried to kiss her. She pushed me away. I can't remember the order of things, or what happened exactly. It was a long time ago, 7 years ago to be precise. My mind's a little blank. I was drunk at the time. I had drunk a ton of beers. But when she rejected me, it got too much for me to handle. I got mad because my ex-girlfriend had rejected me as well. And now I felt fired up with indignance. I wanted to get my revenge on Nicola and this woman at the same time. I picked up my hunting rifle and began firing at the lake. And then one thing led to another. And for some reason I ended up chasing Babs into the woods. She was absolutely terrified because I told her I was going to kill her. And I meant every word of it. That's how angry I was. I may have been drunk, but I held my own and went after her. I was filled with an insatiable anger. Oh, I cannot tell you how furious I was. I just wanted to kill her.
Oh my God, Max! You killed her! How did it happen? Please, God, tell me this isn't true. I can't believe what you're telling me.
I'm sorry, babe. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. But it is true. I'm not happy with what I did back then. I've regretted it for many years. I gave her chase, following her into the woods with my rifle and my bright torch, and then finally I succeeded in catching up with her. She was hiding under a bramble bush, would you believe? The only reason I discovered she was there was I saw a piece of her shirt caught up on a thorny briar. So I looked under the bush, and there she was. I could hardly believe it. I would never have looked for her under that bush if she hadn't ripped off a piece of that shirt. It proved to be her undoing. She was shaking and trembling like a leaf. She was terrified of me. It was so easy after that. Far too easy. It was like yanking a trapped animal out of a cage. She was helpless. I remember dragging her by the legs. She was kicking and screaming and begging for her life. And then I pulled the trigger and blew her brains out. And in that moment I was very happy that she was a goner. I thought that she got what she deserved because she'd rejected me. I wasn't thinking right at the time. As I keep telling you, not that I'm making excuses for myself, of course, but I was in a bad place emotionally. As I keep saying, it's hard to explain. Something almost takes over me, and I can't stop myself from doing what I do. The next morning, of course, after I sobered up, I realized what I'd done and the gravity of what I'd done. So I had to get rid of her body, didn't I? I weighted her body down with stones that I found lying around the place, and then I threw her into the lake. Then I got the hell out of there as fast as I could, making sure there was no evidence of my presence on the campground. I picked up every shell casing I could find from my rifle and got the hell out of there. I told the owner of the campground, a man called Chris Wilton, that I'd never been able to go to the campground, and he believed me. So that was that. I can read you a newspaper article if you like, said Max, ferreting in his wallet to bring out a crumpled piece of newspaper that looked like it had been read 100 times over. The police remain mystified as to the disappearance of a young 22-year-old woman called Barbara Roxburgh, known to her friends as Babs, who went missing at the Lakefield camping ground in Mount Rainier on Saturday last, where her tent remained pitched, but her whereabouts could not be located. The police searched the entire area thoroughly and were unable to find the missing woman. A cadaver dog was brought onto the scene and went running straight through the woods, sitting down at a trail close to a bush of brambles, where he began to make a whining sound. The dog's handler said the dog was telling him he could smell a deceased corpse, and that he believed, based on his dog's behaviour, that Barbara Roxburgh was no longer in life, but her body was obviously never recovered, so it must have been moved away. Yet the same dog seemed to show an interest in the lake, and the dog handler believed the body might be in the water. A diver searched the lake thoroughly and couldn't find any sign of a body, but then again the lake was full of vegetation, and he claimed it was difficult to see clearly. Veronica Wilton, who was Barbara Roxburgh's very best friend, had invited her to stay at her uncle's private camping ground, with its magnificent prepossessing views over Mount Rainier. She described her best friend as being in a very dark place, due to a recent break-up with her ex-boyfriend Russell Bridges, who had ended their relationship as he had discovered he had stage 4 colon cancer and had been diagnosed with only 6 months left to live. He had broken up with Babs because he didn't want to put her through the hell of watching him fade away. So he thought telling her that he was no longer in love with her
would help her to move forward with her life. She was a broken woman, Veronica told our reporter. I've never seen her so broken before. I thought if I brought her to the camping ground, it would help get her mind off Russell. At the time I had no way of knowing that Russell was suffering from end-stage cancer, and I wish he had told Babs about this, for she could have supported him during this grievous time, and then none of this would ever have happened. Babs would probably still be with us now. I should never have left Babs at the camping ground all on her own. My mother had had a nasty fall in Seattle, so I wanted to see if she was all right. I drove all the way to Seattle with the intention of coming back as soon as I could to continue with our camping adventure, which we thought we might extend for a couple of days or so. Babs wanted to remain on the campground, and given there were no other campers apart from a young couple who failed to show up, I was sure Babs would be fine. I was detained at the hospital longer than I envisaged, but I returned to the camping ground to continue with our holiday break, and Babs had disappeared off the face of the earth. I searched for her high and low, becoming increasingly frantic, and then I'm afraid I was forced to call the police, who did a thorough search of the campground and found no sign of her anywhere. When asked if she thought her friend might be suicidal, Veronica said that she really didn't believe that Babs would take her own life. But then again, she told the paper, you don't really know what goes on in a person's head, do you? The investigation remains ongoing, but it would seem that Barbara Roxburgh's disappearance has left the police completely stumped. As to what became of her, Shelley was listening to her fiancé reading the article. She had barely moved an inch. He tucked the piece of paper away in his wallet. She didn't know how to react to what he'd told her. She could have forgiven her fiancé many things, but this she couldn't forgive. You killed her, she said to Max again. I don't care if you were drunk, Max, you killed her. You did a horrendous thing. What you did, I can't believe it, Max. I'm in shock. This isn't the person I know.
But you said it didn't matter what I'd done, that you would still love me.
This is different, Max. You know it.
I told you I was in a bad place. How many times have I got to tell you that? Said Max, snapping. I was drunk. Things got out of hand, way too out of hand. I lost it in a moment of unbridled rage. Can't you understand that?
I don't care about any of that. It doesn't change a thing. Furthermore, when you were sober the following morning, you threw her body in the lake and covered your tracks, so no one would know you'd been at the camping ground. You did it intentionally. It was calculating. That poor woman's parents. Have you even thought about them? They've probably been grieving her loss for years, wondering what became of their little girl. What about that friend of hers? She probably feels so guilty for abandoning her at the camping ground and lives with this guilt. Do you have any idea what those people must have been through? Why didn't the diver not find her body in the lake? I don't understand that.
God only knows. Maybe he didn't search well enough, but there was a great deal of vegetation and rocks in the water, so it's not always easy to find a deceased corpse. And the report says as much, if I remember right. Why are you looking at me like this, Shelley? As if you don't know me any more. You do know me. I'm still the same man you met at the doggy park. I messed up, that's all. I've taken responsibility for what I did, even though I still get nightmares. But the good news is, I don't drink alcohol anymore.
You haven't taken responsibility, Max. Far from it, in fact. If you had taken responsibility, you'd have admitted to what you'd done. You'd have gone straight to the police and confessed to the crime. Instead, you kept quiet and did not do a thing. It's disgusting, that's what it is.
What, you think I should have confessed my crime to the police, is that it? And been charged for murder, spending the rest of my life behind bars? Is that what you think I deserve?
Yes, that's what you do deserve, Max, because of what you did. I'd never have believed you were capable of any of this. I'm sorry, but I think we should pack up and leave right now. What you've told me is huge. I've got to think about everything you've told me long and hard, Max, said Shelley. Look, I believe you really do regret what you did, but it doesn't make any of this right. I need to think about what you've told me and see where we go to from here, Max. You need to take me home right now. I need to think about what you've told me.
What is there to think about, Shelley? You love me. I love you. I shared a big secret with you, and you promised me faithfully you would love me regardless of what I've done. All right, I admit I'm not proud of what I did. Can we please move on from here? Surely you wouldn't want me to rot away in a prison cell for the rest of my life. I made one mistake. Yes, I regret it. But I can't undo the mistake. You claimed you would forgive me if I ran over someone in the road by mistake and fled from the scene. There is no difference. I drank too much. I told you. I overreacted.
It is hugely different, Max, and you know it. I did not think the man I loved was capable of doing a thing like this. What you've told me changes everything. Absolutely everything.
But you said it didn't matter what I'd done, that you would love me regardless.
I told you I need to think about things, Max. Before Shelley could say another word, Max began to shake her vigorously, and it really started to hurt her.
You can't leave me, Shelley. You can't. I love you.
Get your hands off me, Max, said Shelley, pushing him away hard. Do you want to hurt me like you hurt Barbara Roxburgh? Is that it?
Of course not. You're not going to tell the police what I did, are you?
Asked Max, his eyes widening in horror, and then a coldness swept over his face, and his eyes went insidiously dark. And in that moment Babs absolutely knew that she would not get away from this campground alive. Was history about to repeat itself all over again? Was her body going to be flung into a lake like Babs Roxburgh's body had been 7 years earlier? Shelley's grandmother's words echoed in her mind.
All I'm saying, love, is just be careful, will you?
Get off me, Max. Let's talk about this, shall we? Said Shelley, rising to her feet. Let's talk about this.
There's nothing to talk about, is there? Said Max. You've made your feelings perfectly clear, Shelley. I thought you and I were together for keeps, and that I could share my deepest, darkest secrets with you. But it seems you're not as faithful or as devotedly loyal as I thought you were. I thought I could trust you, but now I see I was delusional. I overestimated your faithfulness in me. You're a bitch, like every other woman I've ever met. You're no different. And I'm sorry, Shelley, but you're not going to get out of here alive. Go on, run! Run into the woods! I encourage you to do so. Take a torch if you like. There's one over there next to the camping chair. I'll keep our cell phones, he said, holding up 2 cell phones in his hands. We wouldn't want you getting any naughty ideas about calling your brother Morris for help. Fat lot of good that will do you. I'll be very generous. I'll give you a 5-minute head start. Can't say fairer than that. And when I catch up with you, I will wring your neck like a chicken, and then throw you in the lake like I did with Barbara Roxburgh. I may not have a hunting rifle at my disposal, but there are many other ways you can skin a cat.
You won't get away with this, Max. There's no way you will. My grandmother's a shrewd woman. She doesn't trust you an inch. She told me to be careful. If I don't return to Seattle from this campground, the police will be all over you like a hive of bees. The best thing is to give yourself up, Max, and admit what you've done. You know it's the right thing to do, Max. Please don't do anything stupid that you're going to regret. You've ended one woman's life, and now you want to take mine as well.
5 minutes, said Max. I'm giving you 5 minutes. A 5-minute head start. Now run, or you're already dead. The choice is yours.
Babs could see by the dark, murderous look in Max's eyes that he seriously meant business. He was definitely going to kill her, like he'd killed Barbara Roxburgh 7 years earlier. Why had she not pretended that the fact that he had murdered someone was not a big deal, and that yes, she would keep his secret? And when she'd got home safely, she could have gone straight to the police and reported the murder to them. But Shelley wore her heart on her sleeve, and found it difficult to hide the disgust that was written all over her face, that Max had seen so clearly. Now that Max knew that she would obviously betray his trust, her life was in serious jeopardy, and it hung in the balance, for he would not let her leave this campground, knowing what she intended to do. The day had started so magnificently, but in a second The man that she believed she'd loved more than life itself had become a monster to her. It was clear that even without alcohol in his system to bring out the worst in Max, this was a man that was capable of a great evil, even when he was sober, and he'd stop at nothing to protect his insidious dark secret, even if it meant killing the woman only moments before he professed to love. Max was beginning to count out loud.
1, 2, 3.
Shelley felt she'd been flung onto a scene of the Hunger Games, and so she did all she knew to do, and that was to run through the woods with a torch in her hands that Max had given her. Why hadn't he just throttled her then and there, and been done with it? Why was he giving her a 5-minute head start? The man was seriously sick in the head. He was deranged. It was almost as if he was getting some kind of twisted pleasure in giving her chase. Yet he claimed to love her, but his love was not a genuine love. That was plain to see. How could she have been so easily fooled and duped by a man that her grandmother had seen through, like a sheer translucent pane of glass? Babs would have loved to have jumped into Max's white SUV and driven away as fast as she could from the campground, but she didn't even know the code for leaving the campground, and furthermore she knew her car keys were on his person, so she began to scuttle away as fast as she could towards the tall lofty trees to take cover. The night had been so prepossessingly beautiful, with its velvety blackness glamorizing the silvery stars in the sky, but now its tenebrific veil seemed menacing and inauspicious. Even the trees shook their manes of evergreen needles under a light breeze, and they too appeared to be conspiring against her. For suddenly Shelley felt remarkably vulnerable and desperately afraid. "Oh, please God! Please God! Help me! Don't let him kill me!" she cried out. Then she heard Max's booming voice in the distance shouting out, "I'm coming to get you, Shelley! Sorry, time's run out!" Shelley's heart thundered violently in her chest. What should she do, she wondered. There was no point in hiding. She knew that Max would easily find her. Running would almost certainly be a fool's errand. And to what end? Where would she run to? It was all pointless. Barbara Roxburgh's sorry story confirmed all this. Oh, what was she going to do? She couldn't run aimlessly through the woods at the dead of night like this. She'd only served to succeed in exacerbating her exhaustion, leaving herself a sitting duck for a very strong man like Max. The only thing she could do was to defend herself, but first she needed to take cover and hide. She found for herself a huge branch that she would use to whack the living daylights out of Max. If she had to kill him, then so be it. It was self-defense as far as she was concerned, but it would be so much better to just knock him out cold. If she succeeded in her endeavours, she'd be able to get a head start on him, retrieve the keys from his pocket, find the code number for the gates of the camping ground, and get the hell out of there. A blistered plan began to develop in Shelley's head. Grandpa Bobby had always told her that to succeed in war, you always needed a clever plan, and the element of surprise was crucial in wartime situations, and was a powerful tool, giving you a great advantage over your enemy. Shelley was no match for Max, that was for sure, but if she was clever and astute enough and crept up behind him surreptitiously and delivered a huge blow to the back of his head, then he wouldn't even know what had hit him. But if she did this, she had to be quick about it and very quiet at the same time. Could she actually do it? She wasn't exactly sure. She doubted that she had the courage or skill to embark upon such a challenge, but she didn't have the advantage of choice. Shelley found a stout branch, a hefty one at that, the size of a baseball bat, that would be capable of delivering a deadly blow. So she went to hide surreptitiously behind a tree, clutching the branch so tightly that the knuckles in her hands became incredibly white. She waited for Max to make his presence known. Shelley was sure Max would be expecting her to run so fast, like Barbara Roxburgh had done, but no, she was waiting for him, so that like a silent predator in the darkness she would pounce on him, and when he least expected it, he'd be attacked. She needed to outwit him in some way. Shelley was glad of the darkness, for the ambiguous shadows that danced around the grove did their quintessential part in hiding her presence. But if Max was astute and diligent enough, he'd surely see her, and if he did, she would almost certainly have all her hope expunged. She was concerned, however, that the booming sound of her heart would be so loud that Max would pick it up. Shelley took refuge behind a tree, occasionally peeking behind the substantial-sized tree trunk to fix her gaze upon the trail. Her only thought was, "Is he coming? Is he coming?" She wanted to get this over and done with as fast as she could, as her knees were barely capable of supporting her and were wobbling beneath her like an unsteady table, and with every second her courage was beginning to wane. All of a sudden she got the profound sense that she was not alone, that something or someone was watching her. She flashed her torchlight around the trees, but saw nothing. She was losing it, she thought. She needed to quieten down her imagination, which did not serve her best interests right now. She needed to focus attentively on every single passing second, not allowing any wayward thoughts to muddy the waters of her concentration. A shiver of dread ran down her spine like an electric spasm, and every hair on the back of her neck stood up on end. Shelley didn't move. She didn't dare to. She stood as still as an ice statue at a luxury banquet, even though it was cool in the grove, with a light, cool wind whipping through the trees. It would seem the heat of her own perspiration had broken out on her face, and sweat was pouring down her back. Everything in the woods went mute, as the crickets and frogs switched off their tuneful chorus almost immediately, as if they too had sensed that the ambience of the woodgrove had shifted quite significantly to something infinitely more menacing. Then she heard the dreadful sound of Max's boots pulverizing the forest floor as he crunched twigs and fallen leaves and needles under his feet like a hefty pestle. He was cursing under his breath, and she heard him saying, "Bloody bitch! Bloody bitch! I'm going to wring her neck like a chicken. How could I have got her so wrong? She's no different to the other bitches I've dated. They were all the bloody same. So damn ungrateful, so incredibly selfish." Max's bright torchlight pierced blindingly through the trees, and Shelley was terribly afraid her cover would be blown. But he had not seen her, and as he walked past her, she crept cautiously behind him, with her tree branch in her hand, and was about to deliver him a massive blow to the back of his head, when Max promptly turned around, and a malevolent grin cast itself upon his face. "You made it so easy for me. Easier than I imagined, didn't you, Shelley?" he said, lunging towards her and grabbing her arm, and he pulled the branch out of her clutches, so she couldn't even use it against him, for it just dropped out of her hands. "You underestimated me, Shelley, didn't you?" "Please, please, Max. I'm begging you, don't do this. Think about what you're doing. I love you. We can be together forever. I promise I won't tell anyone what you did. I mean, what we have together, it's so important, it's so special. I wouldn't want to wreck it by going to the police. Your secret is safe with me, Max, I promise you. I love you. You mean the world to me. We can put this behind us, can't we?" "Liar. I'm not a bloody idiot, Shelley. I wasn't born yesterday. I can see right through you. You made your position very clear, and I've made mine." All of a sudden Shelley found herself flung to the forest floor, and Max was on top of her. He leered down at her, and in the depths of a deep, almost menacious hatred, she could see burning in the green flames of his once beautiful eyes that had become cold and cruel. "Any last words, Shelley?" "Please, Max, please, don't do this, I beg you, don't do this." But Max's thick fingers were around Shelley's neck before she could protest any further. He began to squeeze, and Shelley knew it was all over. She shut her eyes, praying her death would come quickly, and then she heard Max screaming. Wasn't she the one that was supposed to be screaming, not the other way round? Max has released his grip from around her neck. What was going on? She opened her eyes, and that was when she saw her. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. A giant-sized female Bigfoot had picked up Max by the scruff of the neck and appeared to be dangling him like a puppet, and Max was shrieking, his eyes bulging from his sockets. "Help, Shelley! Do something, Shelley!" Shelley clutched her neck because it was still hurting from being squeezed so tightly. She sat up and stared at the Bigfoot through bemused eyes. not knowing what to make of the scene unfolding before her very eyes, which was insanely bizarre. The female Bigfoot was impressively tall, possibly about 9 foot, and was enormously big and very robust, with overlong arms and a pyramid-shaped head. She was covered in thick thatches of black hair, and was looking directly at Max, almost as if he was a cockroach. The female Bigfoot tossed him in the air a couple of times like a pancake, and then caught him just as he was about to hit the ground. She thrust his entire body against the tree, using it almost like an axe, and then in a second Max's scalp cracked wide open, and he lay on the forest floor unmoving, and Shelley felt only heartfelt relief as she realized the man she thought she'd loved could hurt her no longer. The Bigfoot stood there silently, kicking the dead body in disgust, with a repulsed look on her face, and then her eyes met Shelley, and a telepathic exchange began between the two of them, a conversation that Shelley would never be likely to forget. "I saw him do this before," said the Bigfoot, "but not again. I couldn't let it happen again, even though my kind don't like to interfere with your kind. But I couldn't help myself. I saw it all, and had to do something. Last time I couldn't, but this time things were different. That man is not well. He wanted to kill you. His rage was all-consuming. I couldn't stand here and let that happen, especially since you were so much smaller than him, and didn't stand a chance. I was in the middle of a hunt, but your presence in the woods scared the raccoons I was chasing away. When I saw the man on top of you squeezing your neck, I knew there was no place for him here. He needed to be dealt with very firmly, and learn a tough lesson. I'm sorry you had to see me slinging his body in the way I did against the tree. But I couldn't resist. I was upset with what he did to you. It wasn't pretty. I wanted to scare him a little before I ended his suffering, for he needed to taste what fear feels like." "I'm fine now," said Shelley in her head, realizing that the female Bigfoot could read her mind, so dialogue wasn't necessary. "Thanks to you, I'll be fine. You saved my life. If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. I'm so grateful to you. I don't know how to thank you. You say you saw him kill the other girl in the woods. Is that the girl who died 7 years ago? Is that what you saw?" "It was a while back," the Bigfoot admitted. "I saw him pulling a woman from under a thorn bush. She was begging him not to hurt her, and then he shot her in the head. I would have stopped him then and there if I could have, but I didn't because it was not meant to be." "What do you mean, not meant to be? I don't understand." "There's a time for everything. A time for a flower to burst forth on the meadow in a blaze of colour, and a time for that very same flower to die. Even before we were born, we chose the way we would exit from this planet, as did I. But luckily we don't remember all that, as none of us like to know the way we will die. Although we don't die, we just change form, from an earthly body into a spiritual one. I saw him kill her. She didn't have any more exit points left in her life, you see. She had planned to leave the earth plane very early. Before she was born, she planned this. So my intervention would have only postponed the inevitable. So I let things flow out naturally, as they were meant to. So this isn't my exit point? Is that what you're saying? Everyone is uniquely different. I can see in your energy you have 8 exit points. 8 times where you can choose to leave this earth plane. This was one of them. I was able to stop you leaving, because you still have 7 left. And I can see your soul still has much to accomplish on the earth plane. That's why I had to intervene and help you. You weren't ready to go. You were like the green fruit on a tree that falls off too early, and has a long way to go before it finally ripens. I thought he was a good person. How could I have got him so wrong? Because your kind cannot read other people's minds and thoughts. You cannot see energy fields, nor can you see into the ethereal realms like I can. I couldn't imagine such limitations myself. So you could tell that he was a bad man, could you? Asked Shelley, looking at the Bigfoot curiously. I wouldn't say he's intentionally bad, but he's governed by a powerful red aura that dictates his emotions and overrides his common sense. The red aura can be extremely tumultuous at the best of times. Believe me, I know all about it from learned experience. This man can seem so amenable, So nice. But when he's angry, he loses all control and erupts like the mountain over there," she said, pointing towards Mount Rainier. "When that happens, he's volatile, explosive, and dangerous, and for that reason, he needed to be dealt with. It sometimes happens with my own kind too. And when one of them becomes a liability, sometimes we have no other choice but to take him or her out, for violence puts us all in mortal danger. I know of one family that had 3 red auras, all 3 of them boys. The father killed them at birth. He knew they imposed a great threat. He was very sad to have to do that, but sometimes you do what you have to do for the greater good." The Bigfoot helped Shelley to her feet, but she discovered to her horror there was no energy left inside her, so she slumped on the floor. "You're in shock," said the Bigfoot. "I tell you what, I'll carry you back to your camp." And with that she threw Shelley over her powerful shoulders and glided back to the lake's edge, where Max had pitched their tent. The trills of the crickets filled the night, and the sky above her head glistened down on her, bejewelled with so many bedazzling stars, and Shelley was suddenly struck with a profound realization that she was exceedingly lucky to be alive. The Bigfoot informed Shelley that she would get rid of Max's body, and she gave Shelley his car keys. She then carried Shelley to her tent and dropped her off. Shelley crashed into her sleeping bag and fell into a deep, contented sleep that night. She was too exhausted to deal with the night's affairs. In the morning she woke up and called her brother Morris, who was at the campground in less than 15 minutes. She informed him about everything that had transpired, and together they carefully told the police that Shelley had woken up in her tent in the middle of the night to find her boyfriend all but missing. "He got up in the middle of the night to answer a call of nature," she said. "He never returned." She didn't want to tell the police that a large female Bigfoot had killed her boyfriend, for she was sure her story would not be believed, and end up making her look as if she had something bad to hide. The police took Shelley in for questioning, and seemed completely satisfied that she had nothing to do with her fiancé's disappearance. They informed her that this was not the first time someone had gone missing in that campground, as a woman had disappeared 7 years earlier. "Some places, ma'am, are notorious for people going missing, I'm afraid. Almost as if something outer-worldly is going on." The police searched the campground and found no sign of Max McKeith. So Shelley knew that Bigfoot had made good of her promises and lightly buried Max in a place where he would never ever be found. Max had a memorial service because he was assumed dead. His mother told her that he'd always been a difficult child, predisposed to temper tantrums that would make him become unhinged and volatile. "He was always beating up boys at the school playground, you know, getting into all kinds of scrapes. I could never control him. There were times, I hasten to say, I was terrified of my own son. I know it's bad to speak ill of the dead, but I have to tell you, young lady, you had a lucky escape, so don't mourn him too much. I told my husband whoever married my son, well, you've got to feel sorry for them." Shelley couldn't believe that Max's own mother spoke of her son in this way, but according to Max's sister Julia, Max really had been impossible to love because of his volatile, explosive temper. Shelley sent an anonymous letter to the police, informing them that she had heard the body of Barbara Roxburgh could be found in the lake, at the Lakefield camping ground. "I think you need to search the lake better. I believe the body is definitely there." One day a newspaper article got Shelley's undivided attention. It read, "The body of missing woman Barbara Roxburgh, that went missing 7 years ago, was found at the lake at the Lakefield camping ground in Mount Rainier, after an anonymous tip-off from the police. The family of Barbara Roxburgh can now finally put their daughter to rest. Autopsy results confirm that the young woman suffered from a gunshot injury to her head. As to who killed Barbara Roxburgh, the investigation remains ongoing." When Shelley read the report, she sighed with relief, glad that closure had been given to the Roxburgh family. As to the whereabouts of Max McKeith, the investigation was now closed, but he was registered as a missing man, assumed dead. These days Shelley is now happily married with 2 children of her own, and still lives in Seattle. but she never forgot the Bigfoot that saved her life that day. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.